Will you be my girlfriend with the intention of marrying me? That's what everyone I met through a friend wanted to know. One guy, who was 3 years younger than me, said he fell for me right away. I thought about my age and wanting to settle down, so I said yes. A year later, we tied the knot. I'm Michelle, 34 years old, working for a big company. Living overseas has always been my dream. My husband, Paul, is younger than me, but he's a natural leader and takes charge in our relationship. He's the one who leads our household, and I'm okay with that. I've been used to living alone for a while, so I don't mind doing the chores and cooking. Paul doesn't pitch in much, but I don't find it bothersome. When we're out together, Paul always takes the lead, which lets me relax and have fun without any worries. It feels like a nice balance between us. However, everything changed when my mother passed away while I was working. I got a call from my dad, telling me that my mom's illness had gotten worse and she collapsed. I rushed to the hospital, about 2 hours away, to say my final goodbye. I stayed with my dad to help arrange the funeral. When I called Paul, he said he couldn't leave work on short notice. He didn't come to the wake, and although he made it to the funeral, he wasn't dressed appropriately. I had to quickly arrange a suit for him to rent. He complained a lot, saying I should have sorted everything out beforehand. With all the grief and business, I couldn't deal with Paul's complaints, so I brushed them off. But he didn't seem to appreciate that, and he was in a bad mood the whole time. Since then, it seems like our arguments as a couple have been on the rise. It's normal to have some disagreements after being married for 3 years, but lately, Paul's been picking fights more aggressively. His controlling behavior has been overwhelming, often telling me what to do and taking charge. I grew tired of it and tried standing up to him a few times, but since he didn't know how things were managed around the house, even simple tasks like preparing for his business trips became lengthy affairs. Plus, he'd complain while trying to help, only making more of a mess. Eventually, I realized it was easier if I just handled things myself. It wasn't about blindly obeying him. I took charge of certain tasks to save myself the hassle. I'm going to start preparing for us to join the gathering for my mom's first death anniversary next week, I informed Paul. He responded grumpily, "Okay, but I have an important meeting that day. What should I do?" I've mentioned this gathering well in advance. I was taken aback by his sudden remark. "What? You're not going?" Paul sighed heavily. "It's not that, but it'll be tough to delegate everything to my juniors, you know." He seemed pleased with his recent promotion and often talked about his junior team members. I felt like sighing in return. "Please plan for it, okay?" I emphasized. The day before the gathering, when I got home from work, Paul was sulking and drinking beer in the living room. "I'm sorry I'm late." I had to work overtime. I apologized. I could tell he was upset because I was late and dinner was delayed. "I've been waiting here for an hour just as I thought," he grumbled. "But it's just 1 hour, isn't it?" I reasoned. If he couldn't prepare dinner, he could have gone out to buy something. I had informed him of my late arrival time. He could have taken some initiative and handled things on his own. Suppressing the urge to speak my mind, I handed him a takeout box. I thought it'd take too long if I cooked, so I picked this up on my way home instead, I explained. In response, Paul slammed a glass of beer onto the table. "Takeout again? Aren't you slacking off a bit too much lately?" The last time I brought home takeout was about 2 weeks ago. True, I've been busy lately and maybe I haven't been cooking elaborate meals every day. But I always make sure we have a balanced diet and rarely rely on prepackaged items. Still, I didn't think I deserved that kind of criticism. As I debated whether to respond, Paul, misunderstanding something, decided to add insult to injury. "Can't say anything because it's true, huh? Do your chores properly. You've been coming home late lately, claiming you're working overtime. You're probably just out having an affair," Paul shouted. His words ignited a wave of anger that had been simmering inside me. Enough was enough. If you know I'm working late, the least you can do is prepare dinner for us. It's okay if you can't cook. Getting takeout isn't too difficult, is it? I always let you know when I'll be late. And despite being busy, I handle all our household chores. "There's no need for that kind of attitude," I asserted. Paul shot me a glare. "You know what? You're 3 years older than me. I could have married someone in their 20s, but I chose you, an older woman. Show some appreciation and do as I say. No one else would want you, so you'd be in trouble if I left, wouldn't you? Did he really just say that? I was furious and couldn't hold back any longer. Then maybe you should have married a younger woman when we started dating before we got married. I asked if you were okay with me being older, and you said yes. That's why we got married. Even without you, I could manage my life, I retorted. Paul scoffed at my words. Whatever, let's get a divorce. With that, he grabbed his beer and the takeout box and stormed off to his room. We had arguments before, but this was a first. I was done with him. I decided to eat my takeout dinner to calm my nerves, assuming Paul was probably just irritated because he was hungry. But even as I filled my stomach, I couldn't shake off the disbelief that this was all happening the day before my mother's first death anniversary. After a while, I called out to Paul from outside his room, "We need to leave by 8 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 7. There was no response, but I sensed he was awake. With those words said, I went to bed, feeling unsettled. The next morning, when I woke up early, Paul was already gone. The bags I had packed were still in the room, indicating he hadn't left for the gathering without me. Where had he disappeared to? I called his cell, but got no answer. My texts went unanswered too. Left with no other option, I left a voicemail and began getting ready to head out alone. I managed to reach Paul while waiting at the train station. I have to go to my meeting. I can't leave it to my juniors, after all, was all he said before the call abruptly ended. Overwhelmed by a mix of anger and resignation, I found myself in a state of stunned confusion. Before I could process it further, the train arrived, carrying luggage for 2, but I boarded alone. When I arrived at my father's house, he anxiously inquired, "Where's Paul?" Seeing my father's sadness since my mother's passing, I didn't want to add to his worries. Taking a deep breath, I forced a smile and replied, "Sorry, he got called into an important meeting. He was supposed to come here, but he recently got a promotion, and it sounded urgent, so I suggested he prioritize that." My father nodded understandingly. "I see. He's working hard. It's a shame I couldn't see him, but your mother would understand. Let him know he's always welcome to visit." Though his words stung a bit, I kept up the smile throughout the day. With no word from Paul, the night passed without any contact from either of us. Planning to stay overnight and return home the next day as originally intended, I felt a bit childish for not reaching out to him. Maybe I'd cook his favorite dish, hamburgers, tomorrow to make amends. With that thought, I went to bed. The next day, after leaving my father's house and arriving home around noon, I decided to drop off my bags before heading to the grocery store. As expected, dirty laundry was strewn around the living room, a sign that Paul still hadn't grasped how to use the washing machine. Sighing, I gathered the laundry and tossed it into the washer along with my own. Taking a break and returning to the living room, something on the table caught my eye. As I got closer, disbelief washed over me. There, sitting on the table, were divorce papers, already signed by Paul. Why? I stared at the papers, bewildered. Was this his way of asking for a divorce? Pulling out my cell phone from my bag, I realized it should be Paul's lunch break. I wasn't sure if Paul would answer, but to my surprise, he picked up on the first ring. "Paul, what's the deal with these divorce papers?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. On the other end, Paul laughed. "What do you mean? It's pretty straightforward. I don't want an older wife who won't do her share of household chores. That's why I've decided on a divorce. If we split, I can find someone younger and more appealing. After all, a wife is like a status symbol, isn't she? It's hard to boast about you being older when my colleagues ask. Dodging the topic isn't exactly simple." I was speechless, utterly lost for words. If you don't want a divorce, then start pulling your weight around the house. I'll be home as usual today, so make sure to grab some beer, all right? But if you're set on this, take the divorce papers to the family court. The ball's in your court, he said before hanging up abruptly. The call left me stunned, unable to utter a single word. It seemed Paul believed his ultimatum would force me to comply. All this time, I'd done the chores not out of fear of him leaving, but because I disliked having to ask him. He likely assumed otherwise, presuming my compliance stemmed from a fear of abandonment, given his dominant nature. Being married to a younger man might draw envy from others, but in reality, there's nothing particularly remarkable about it. I often found myself emphasizing his age, but truth be told, he's quite average in appearance, personality, and income. Describing him as younger was simply convenient. Initially, the age gap concerned me, but now that we're both in our 30s with only a 3-year difference, it feels insignificant. Had the gap been wider, perhaps I feel differently, but constantly being labeled as the older wife when we're essentially peers feels disheartening. I grabbed my bag and made a beeline for the family court. As I handed in the divorce papers, a wave of relief washed over me. Despite thinking we were doing okay, it's clear things are over now. But I can manage without Paul. With that realization, a weight lifted off my shoulders, prompting me to reach out to my boss and request a few days of paid leave. Luckily, work had just eased up, so he granted me about a week off. Now that I'm divorced, it's time to sort out my belongings. Thankfully, I didn't have much to begin with, so tidying up was a breeze. I stashed the larger items in a storage unit, packed my essentials and clothes into the car, and on a whim, decided to head to a hot spring resort. It seemed like the off-season for hotels, so I managed to snag a cheap room on the spot. The thrill of the drive filled me with excitement. As I soaked in the hot springs and lounged in my room, my phone suddenly rang. "Michelle, I asked you to pick up beer, didn't I? Where are you?" I couldn't help but chuckle, recalling Paul's usual routine. "I'm actually at a hot spring resort right now," I replied. "What? A hot spring resort? Why?" Paul's confusion was evident in his voice. "Well, you did say to file the divorce papers if I disagreed with you," I reminded him, amused at the thought of his reaction. "Wait, you actually filed them?" Paul sounded flustered. "Of course I did." "Why? Is something wrong? After all, it was your suggestion." Paul finally regained his composure. "Are you serious? When you say hot spring resort, do you mean some nearby spa? If that's the case, I'll grab dinner, so just come home soon." His sudden caring tone made me laugh even more. "It's about an hour-and-a-half drive. They even have an outdoor natural hot spring. It's quite lovely. I wonder if it'll rain tomorrow. Since you're going out to buy your own dinner, I've already packed up my things so you won't have to worry about me coming back. Please take care of yourself," Paul pleaded desperately, hoping I would reconsider. But I had no intention of returning. "You're the one who initiated the divorce papers, remember." It was clear he was using the threat of divorce to manipulate me. "I've already told you I can manage without you. Now that you've divorced your older wife, you can find someone younger. Whether you succeed or not is up to you." Paul fell silent. "It might not be my place, but you should consider moving out of that apartment," I continued. Finally, Paul spoke up again. "Why should I?" His voice was barely audible. "Think about your finances. You'll end up broke if you keep living there. You can't handle chores, cooking, or laundry. You'll need to hire help and eat out, right? That's costly. It would be problematic if most of your salary went toward rent. You always thought you were the one providing for me, but my salary is nearly double yours. You've never been the provider. If anything, it's been the opposite. And that confidence you had because of that one junior. I have multiple juniors under me and even more under them. I usually keep work talk to myself because Paul gets moody, but I outrank him both in position and salary. You'd think he'd have noticed by now, living together and all, but it seems like it's news to him. Maybe Paul, being the proud, dominant man he is, kept his ego intact by looking down on me. Now that he can't, he must be feeling quite defeated. I've dealt a blow to this pride, paid back for all these years. As for why I handled the household chores without complaint, even when you acted domineering, it was partly because you were younger and I cut you some slack, and partly because it was too much hassle to ask anything of you. I didn't need you to stay with me. I was just handling your needs alongside my own chores. So when you said, do the chores or we divorce, it was an easy choice. We're strangers now. Goodbye. I said my piece and hung up the phone. Feeling rejuvenated, I savored the hotel's cuisine. As anticipated, Paul reached out for reconciliation, but I responded with a smile. I'm older than you. I doubt you want me back. Apparently, he hadn't fared well with younger women. Eventually, Paul gave up and moved out of the apartment. Engaging a lawyer for asset division, I demanded more to compensate for the burden of household chores I had endured. Paul, being thrifty, didn't hire legal representation, giving me the upper hand. With my lawyer's assistance, we negotiated an agreement with favorable terms for me. Interestingly, it appears Paul's lone junior had been vocal about his poor leadership skills, to the extent that he couldn't even consider him a competent boss. Paul caught wind of this, and they are now embroiled in a dispute. He should have realized the importance of nurturing his own team. As for me, I had been offered a position at our overseas headquarters. Initially hesitant due to the circumstances and out of consideration for Paul, I finally decided to seize the opportunity. I'm currently gearing up for the transition. Though I've caused my father some concern, we've begun practicing video calls to stay connected when I'm abroad. I'm thrilled to pursue the career I've dreamed of since childhood. It's time to give it my all.
The noise of Alex's voice cut through the clinking of dishes like a sharp knife. Alara, bring me some tea now. I paused, my hand in soapy water. Wait, I'm doing the dishes. What? His voice was full of disbelief and impatience. Stop that and bring me the tea quickly. Can't you follow simple orders? But, I started, but he cut me off. What a useless wife you are. Make me some sweet coffee, please. It was Mrs. Whitmore, my mother-in-law, speaking from the living room. She was eating a slice of cake she'd taken from the fridge, her eyes glinting with spite. I sighed, looking at the pile of dishes. There are so many. Leave them for later. Just do what we say, useless wife. Alex's words hit like a whip, each one stinging. I was Alara, a 28-year-old working mother feeling trapped in a life that felt more like a prison than a home. I got married at 23, hoping for love and companionship. Instead, I found myself stuck with Alex and his demanding mother. Our 4-year-old son was my only source of joy in a bleak world. We lived in Alex's parents' house, a decision I had to accept under the pretense of taking care of Mrs. Whitmore after my father-in-law passed away. At first, I felt sorry for her, thinking she was grieving, but soon I realized I was just a pawn in her cruel game of domestic control. No matter how much I cooked, cleaned, or worked, it was never enough. My efforts were always met with scorn. My meals were either left untouched or harshly criticized. The stir-fry is so half-hearted, Mrs. Whitmore would sneer. Cook it properly from scratch. I'm busy and can only make simple things, I'd say, trying to sound calm. That's why I hate backtalk from a daughter-in-law, she'd snap. Cook from scratch. Why don't you cook then? You're a good cook, right? I dared to ask once, immediately regretting it. Why would I do housework when you're here? Her response was cold and dismissive. Are you out of your mind? Their cruelty got worse over time. They stopped talking to me altogether, as if I were a ghost in my own home. My presence, once just unappreciated, now felt completely invisible. 5 years passed in a suffocating atmosphere. Alex and I turned 35 and 33, respectively. Our son grew up, but the heavy atmosphere in the house didn't change. My mother-in-law, now 63, seemed to enjoy my unhappiness. One evening, as I walked home from work, I felt a heavy realization sink in. My life seemed meaningless. To them, I was like a shadow, unnoticed and ignored. The only person who seemed to see me was my son. The idea of losing even that little bit of recognition was too much to bear. When I got home, I started cooking right away, trying to push away the sadness. I made mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and pork, hoping to make our dinner feel normal. Bring me the mayo, Alex suddenly commanded, breaking his long silence. Sure, here you are, I replied, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in ages weren't thankful or conversational, just another command. It was too much, the final straw. I couldn't tolerate it anymore. The evening got worse when Mrs. Whitmore said, "Clean the toilet." What? Right now? I couldn't believe it. Yes, right now, she insisted, her voice full of bitterness. I couldn't hold back my frustration. Don't say such things while we're eating. It's disgusting, just like your heart. She hissed, and our argument quickly escalated, with Alex joining in, demanding. I apologized to his mother, but stood my ground for the first time in years. The conflict reached its peak, and I made a decision. I needed to get out of this toxic situation for my son's sake as well as my own. I went to my room determined. I downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and handed them to Alex. He was shocked, but I felt nothing but determination. I'm filing these, I said firmly. As I faced my husband's surprised expression, I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadows. It was time to take control of my life. In the days after I declared my intention to divorce, there were a lot of angry looks and hurtful words, but in the middle of it all, I felt a strange sense of freedom. One evening, as I served dinner, Mrs. Whitmore looked at the meal with disgust. You call this food? Even a child cooks better. I held back my frustration, focusing on my son's smile. Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight. Alex jumped in, sarcastic. Oh, now suddenly you're the perfect mother, huh? What a joke. I could feel anger rising, but I stayed calm. I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son. Mrs. Whitmore scoffed. Don't act like you're better than us. You're just a nuisance in this house. The tension at the table was thick. Alex's insults kept coming. So, Alara, have you even thought about how you'll manage after the divorce? You can barely handle running a household, let alone your own life. I looked him in the eye. I've been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son. His smirk faded slightly, a hint of unease crossing his face. Mrs. Whitmore quickly stepped in. Don't be ridiculous. You rely on us more than we rely on you. The conversation shifted to money, a topic they usually avoided. You know, without my paycheck, this household would struggle. I said more to myself than to them. Mrs. Whitmore scoffed. We'll manage. We don't need your charity. But Alex's silence said it all. He knew the truth. Without my income, they would be in trouble. In the following days, their behavior became more unpredictable. Mrs. Whitmore would switch between trying to persuade me to stay and hurling insults when I resisted. Alex, meanwhile, seemed lost, his confident demeanor fading as the reality of his financial reliance on me sank in. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between them that sent shivers down my spine. Leaving her is not an option, Alex whispered angrily. We rely on her money. Mrs. Whitmore's response was chillingly calculated. Don't fret, I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable she won't even think about leaving. Hearing their true intentions shocked me. They didn't care about me or our son. It was all about control and money. That night, lying in bed, a plan began to form. If they wanted a fight, they would get one, but not with arguments. I would hit them where it hurt most, their pride and their wallets. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman. I want a divorce, and I want to ensure they don't get more than they deserve, I told her. She nodded firmly. We'll make sure of that. You've been the main provider, right? We'll use that. With each passing day, my determination only grew stronger. I started keeping records of everything. The insults, the financial tricks, even the smallest annoyances. It was time to make them face the music. They needed to see the consequences of their actions. As I gathered evidence, I felt a sense of strength. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. The shadows of disrespect were fading away, and in their place, a new beginning was emerging. As the divorce process started, the tension at home grew worse. But with each passing day, my fear faded, replaced by determination. One evening, Mrs. Whitmore tried a different approach. Alara dear, why don't we forget all this unpleasantness? You know we're family, she said, but her words were dripping with insincerity. I held her gaze steady. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Alex, who had been silent, scoffed. Oh, now you're the victim. You're not as innocent as you act. I felt anger rising, but I stayed calm. I'm not pretending anything, Alex. I'm just not willing to be your punching bag anymore. The conversation shifted to money, as it often did. You think you can just take our son and go? How will you support him? Alex challenged. I smiled confidently. I've been supporting this family for years. I'll manage. Mrs. Whitmore's sneer twisted into her face. "You're nothing without us. You'll come begging to return." But their words didn't affect me anymore. I knew my value and the truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She outlined the plan clearly. "We'll expose their financial dependence on you. It'll be crucial in the custody battle and dividing assets." I nodded, feeling validated. The law was backing me, and I was ready to stand up for myself. At home, the tension reached its peak. Mrs. Whitmore's attempts to undermine me became more desperate. "You think you're clever," she spat one evening, "but you're just abandoning your family." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'm finally standing up for myself." Alex joined in, his voice full of anger. "You'll regret this. You can't survive without me." But I wasn't afraid of his threats anymore. As days passed, I prepared for the court battle. I gathered financial documents, recorded their hurtful words, and collected evidence of their neglect. One afternoon, as I sorted through my papers, my son came to me. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" His voice was small and uncertain. I pulled him close, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place and starting a new happy life. Just you and me." His arms tightened around me, and in that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. I was fighting for my son's future, not just for myself. The day of the court hearing approached, bringing a sense of impending freedom. I was ready to confront Alex and Mrs. Whitmore, to put an end to their control and abuse. I was ready to take back my life and give my son the peace and happiness he deserved. It was time for justice, and I was determined to see it through. The day of the court hearing arrived, a day I had been dreading yet eagerly awaiting. Sitting across from Alex and Mrs. Whitmore in the courtroom, I felt a surreal mix of emotions. This was the moment of change. The proceedings began formally. Alex's lawyer painted him as a devoted husband and father, unfairly accused. Mrs. Whitmore portrayed herself as a grieving mother-in-law, mistreated by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. But their act was transparent, their lies obvious. When it was my turn to speak, I spoke clearly, my voice steady. "I have been the only one working to support this family for years. My husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulation have caused constant strain." Alex interrupted, pretending to be hurt. "Alara, how can you say these things?" I turned to him, my gaze firm. "Support isn't just words, Alex. It's about actions, and your actions have been selfish and cruel." The judge listened as I presented my evidence. Financial documents, recordings of their verbal abuse, testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. The truth was clear. As the evidence piled up, Alex's facade crumbled. Mrs. Whitmore's calm demeanor cracked, revealing her true nature. The courtroom fell silent, tension thick in the air. Then came the bombshell that sealed their fate. My lawyer presented evidence, photographs and documents proving Alex's infidelity and Mrs. Whitmore's affair with a neighbor, Mr. Harwood. The courtroom buzzed as the images were shown, revealing their deceit for all to see. Alex paled, his eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Whitmore's anger twisted her expression, her hands shaking. "You violated our privacy," she shrieked, her voice piercing. I met her gaze calmly. "No, I exposed the truth, a truth you both tried to hide for too long." The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Their credibility crumbled, their lies laid bare. As the hearing ended, the judge's decision was clear. I was granted full custody of our son, and assets were divided fairly. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were left with nothing but their ruined reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt like a burden had been lifted. The years of manipulation and abuse were finally behind me. I had stood up to them and won. But the best moment was when my son ran into my arms outside, his face beaming with relief. "We did it, Mom," he said happily. "Yes, we did," I replied, hugging him tightly. "We're free now. This is just the beginning for us." As we walked away together, I knew this victory wasn't just for me. It was for anyone who's ever felt small or powerless. It was for truth and fairness. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with hope and a better future. The aftermath of the court ruling was swift and chaotic. News of Alex and Mrs. Whitmore's deceit spread quickly, staining their reputations in our small community. They could no longer hide behind their facade of respectability. In the days after the verdict, I focused on rebuilding my life with my son, but I couldn't ignore the satisfaction of knowing they were facing the consequences. One evening, while preparing dinner, I had an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Harwood, Mr. Harwood's wife, her eyes filled with tears. "Alara, I heard everything. I can't believe what Sylvia, Mrs. Whitmore, did," she said, her voice trembling with pain. I invited her in, offering a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she poured out her heartache. I trusted her as a neighbor, as a friend, and to think she was having an affair with my husband. I listened, offering comfort. It was clear Mrs. Whitmore's actions had caused more damage than she anticipated. The next day, I ran into Alex in town. He looked defeated, a shadow of his former self, his arrogance gone. I paused, facing him. "What's left to say, Alex?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize how much I relied on you, on your strength." His apology, though belated, marked a shift in power. He had lost everything: his pride, his home, his family. And in that loss, he finally acknowledged his mistakes. But it was Mrs. Whitmore who faced the harshest consequences. Her affair with Mr. Harwood had not only tarnished her reputation, but also led to legal troubles. Mrs. Harwood had filed for divorce and was suing her for alienation of affection. I heard about Mrs. Whitmore's downfall through whispers and rumors from neighbors, painting a picture of a woman brought down by her own actions. She became an outcast, rejected by those she once called friends. One afternoon, I spotted her at the grocery store, her demeanor defeated as she hurried through the aisles. Our paths crossed, and our eyes met briefly. The resentment and defeat in her gaze were clear. "You did this to me," she muttered as she passed by. I watched her go, feeling a mix of pity and vindication. "No, Sylvia, you did this to yourself," I whispered to myself. The tables had turned, and the consequences of their choices were now unavoidable. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were facing the consequences of their years of deceit and manipulation. As I saw them struggle, I understood that the greatest revenge was living well, free from their toxicity. Refocusing on my son and our new life, I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about freedom, breaking away from abuse and control. Looking ahead, I knew the best was yet to come.
I received a call informing me about a falling accident involving my husband, Mike. Panicked, I rushed to the hospital, where the doctor conveyed that the surgery was successful, but Mike hadn't regained consciousness. The uncertainty of when or if he would wake up weighed heavily on me, and I collapsed in despair. The next day, my nephew Tyler, whom I hadn't seen in years, visited the hospital room. He handed me a letter that Mike had left with him a while back, insisting I read it alone. As I read the letter, I discovered an astonishing confession from Mike. To confirm its authenticity, I examined an unconscious Mike and found evidence supporting the letter's contents. Unbeknownst to me, Mike's secret was exposed, leading to unforeseen developments. Mike and I had married early, supported by our strong connection. As I began to enjoy my work, I expressed my desire to continue working after marriage, and we mutually agreed to support each other. Over the years, our bond remained close. Before turning 30, we both desired children, actively trying to conceive. The sudden passing of Mike's voluntarily institutionalized father, whom we had regularly visited, shocked us. Struggling with the loss, we could barely eat. Mike regretted not insisting on living together, and we wanted to repay the debt owed to his father for the support we received in the early years of our marriage. However, a complicated family dynamic unfolded after Mike's mother-in-law's death. Mike's older sister, whom we had hardly met, was more concerned about the inheritance than her grieving father and us. She demanded her share before the funeral, and to pacify her, Mike's father gave her severance money under the condition that she never contact him again. Mike and I were not informed about the sale of his parents' house, making it likely his sister didn't know about it either. Concerned about potential future troubles, we decided to contact her and distribute the assets equally to prevent disputes. The challenge, though, was the absence of a clear will from Mike's father-in-law, who had intended to meet with a lawyer before his sudden demise. Mike called his sister to inform her about their father's death and the funeral arrangements, but the conversation turned sour when she demanded her share of the inheritance without expressing any condolences. Frustrated but trying to remain calm, Mike discussed the inheritance distribution, learning about his sister's recent divorce. He was particularly concerned about his nephew, her son, but the conversation was dominated by the contentious inheritance issue. After the call, Mike was visibly upset and worried about potential disruptions at the funeral, reminiscent of his mother-in-law's funeral. I consented to remain silent as Mike wished. The days following the funeral were consumed by various procedures, and during this time, his sister called almost daily regarding the inheritance. Initially, Mike patiently explained, but gradually he started to ignore her calls, growing tired of the constant disruptions. Eventually, he decided to meet her, and surprisingly, she became quite cheerful about the situation. Feeling uneasy, I wanted to accompany him, but he insisted on facing her alone. For the past 2 years, I have been involved in handling all the arrangements after the deaths of Mike's parents. Mike, however, believed it wouldn't be right to further involve me in dealing with his sister and the inheritance distribution. He assured me he could handle it and requested that I not worry. Trusting his judgment, I decided to wait and observe how things would unfold. Initially planning to join him, a sudden increase in work at my company made it impossible to match his schedule, and Mike ended up meeting her alone as planned. On the day of the meeting, my work was incredibly busy, and during my break, I couldn't help but worry about Mike. Trying to focus on work, I believed that no news was good news. Suddenly, my phone rang, displaying an unknown number with the hospital's name. Though hesitant, I answered, and the nurse confirmed the hospital's name. Learning about Mike's urgent situation, I left work immediately. Upon arriving, I discovered Mike undergoing emergency surgery. The nurse explained his critical condition and sought my consent for the procedure. Overwhelmed, I signed various documents, and the nurse sternly but kindly reminded me to pull myself together, emphasizing that Mike was fighting for his life. Throughout the night, I arranged for Mike's hospital stay and contacted various people. It wasn't until late at night that I could sit beside him, relieved that he was alive. Tears naturally flowed, but I held his hand tightly, hoping for his consciousness to return. However, he remained unresponsive. Around noon the next day, Mike's sister unexpectedly appeared in the room. This was the first time I had seen her since my mother-in-law's funeral. Wondering why she was there, I inquired about how she knew about this hospital. It seemed peculiar as I had not stepped out of Mike's room, making it impossible for her to spot me anywhere else. She assumed Mike was brain dead based on his unconscious state, displaying insensitivity. Despite her lack of concern for his safety or chances of recovery, she demanded compensation for her uninvited visit. To avoid causing a scene in front of Mike, I handed her money and watched her leave the room with an imposing attitude. As she left, she called her son into the room, introducing him as my nephew. Before leaving, she instructed him to look after me. The boy, hesitant at first, approached me and handed me a letter from Mike, stating that it was given without his mother's knowledge. The torn piece of paper seemed to contain an important message from Mike. I quickly perused the letter, discovering that Mike and his sister were initially scheduled to meet at a cafe. However, on the day of their meeting, she unexpectedly called him to her house. Mike, sensing something amiss, decided to document the events while remaining vigilant. The letter revealed a mysterious injury around the time of his mother's death, an incident he had treated himself without my knowledge. As I delved further into the letter, an astonishing story unfolded. During disputes over his mother's inheritance, Mike experienced an odd sensation in his leg after walking through a crowd. To his shock, he found a deep cut on his thigh and a utility knife in his pocket, its blade hidden. His sister now claimed responsibility for the injury, stating she had aimed for an artery in the crowd but failed. She even knew the exact location of the wound. Checking Mike's thigh while he was unconscious, I found the old cut, providing clear evidence of his sister's malicious intent. As anger surged within me, I redressed Mike, focusing on the letter. Mike expressed his conviction that his life was in danger, and he had written the letter hurriedly, while his sister briefly left the room during their inheritance discussion. Oddly, she insisted on having her son present during this discussion, planning to use him as bait in a tearful plea for a larger share of the inheritance. Feeling threatened, Mike had instructed his nephew to give me the letter if anything happened to him. The letter also mentioned evidence in the inner pocket of his jacket. Searching the jacket untouched since the nurse handed it to me, I found a voice recorder. The bloodstains indicated the severity of the accident, and Mike had shielded the recorder to protect the evidence at the risk of his own life. Listening to the shocking contents, I realized it was evidence that could incriminate his sister. In a state of disbelief, I immediately contacted the police. Shortly after, Mike's sister returned cheerfully, claiming satisfaction and demanding the chair I was using. As she casually touched up her makeup, I asked about the outcome of the inheritance distribution. She lied, stating Mike had agreed to give her a larger share. When questioned about the accident, she claimed ignorance. Choosing not to confront her lies immediately, I asked other questions about memories with Mike, their father, her divorce, and her current living situation. Inquiring about the restaurant meeting and subsequent events captured on the voice recorder, she soon became irritated, dismissing my involvement, declaring, "He was my father. You're just an outsider who married into the family." Despite my indirect connection to the inheritance, Mike's life-threatening accident implicated me in a profound way. I implored her to speak the truth, but she responded with visible outrage, asking if I thought she was lying. In response, I played the voice recorder that Mike had risked his life to save. The recording began with Mike expressing concerns about the difficulty of their conversation and his intention to record it as evidence. His sister immediately pressured him for a larger share of their father's inheritance. Initially reserved, she claimed she needed help raising her nephew alone. However, when Mike rejected her suggestion and demanded she ask her ex-husband for child support, her demeanor dramatically shifted. She confessed to inflicting the cut on Mike's thigh during the dispute over their mother's inheritance, admitting she thought it would increase her share. Mike cleverly changed the topic and suggested moving to a public place, inviting her to a nearby fish restaurant. However, her demeanor changed again, and she left to get ready. In that moment, Mike quickly wrote a letter to me, entrusting it to his nephew, and mentioned the voice recorder, hoping I would find it. After leaving her house for a restaurant, Mike treated his sister to lunch. Upon leaving, he suggested consulting a lawyer due to the deadlock in their discussion. When Mike said he was heading home, his sister insisted on accompanying him to the station. During their walk, she tried to dissuade him from involving a lawyer, leading to a commotion and voices calling for an ambulance. The recording stopped, possibly because of the emergency treatment. The sister-in-law initially seemed shocked, then became defiant, dismissing it as a sibling argument unrelated to the inheritance dispute. However, I pointed out that it proved Mike's fall was not an accident, but an incident. The police, who had arrived during her absence, confirmed the contents of the voice recorder. The sister-in-law gasped in disbelief, realizing she couldn't escape accountability. Plainclothes detectives, posing as visitors, blocked the entrance, leaving no easy escape route. As the reality of her actions dawned on her, her arrogant demeanor shifted to fear. The police took her away, dismissing her attempts to deflect responsibility with nonchalant responses. I handed over the voice recorder to the lead investigator. After the sister-in-law's drama subsided, another person appeared, Mike's former brother-in-law. I had called him when contacting the police, and as the nephew saw his father, he exclaimed, "Daddy," leaping into his arms. The former brother-in-law acknowledged me with a nod, embracing his son. This was the first time I had met him since my mother-in-law's funeral. The voice recorder contained the sister-in-law's true feelings about her son, stating she never wanted a child and only gave birth out of obligation. Child care was mostly left to the former brother-in-law, and his parents had often helped. After their divorce, the former brother-in-law assumed he would easily obtain custody of their son. However, driven by a desire for child support, the sister-in-law convincingly portrayed herself as a devoted mother and won custody. Despite having never mistreated their son, her actions were revealed to be routine cruelty, such as depriving him of food and locking him in a closet. Mike's letter disclosed his determination to rescue his nephew from this situation, even at the cost of relinquishing his entire inheritance. Mike believed that offering the entire inheritance would prompt his sister-in-law, motivated by greed, to give up custody of her nephew. This decision was not only about the inheritance, but also about the welfare of his nephew. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I felt compelled to join in the determination to hold the sister-in-law accountable for her actions. The former brother-in-law, witnessing the drastic change in his son, blamed himself for the past. Despite securing a monthly visitation agreement, the sister-in-law consistently denied him access to their son, threatening to cut ties if he persisted. Regretful for not confronting her sooner, the former brother-in-law apologized to his son repeatedly. Determined to rectify the situation, he vowed to confront his sister. The sister-in-law had already been reported not only for the suspicious circumstances surrounding Mike's fall, but also for her mistreatment of the children. The youth division arrived, expressing a desire to hear from the nephew. As a guardian, my presence was required, and I accompanied them to the police station. Mike's recovery was uncertain, but the urgency of the nephew's situation took precedence. At the police station, a confrontation ensued between the former brother-in-law and the sister-in-law. In a moment of distress, she made outrageous accusations, labeling her son as a child of a demon. The police, unswayed by her claims, detained her. With the sister-in-law in custody, the focus shifted to the nephew's custody. Based on recorded statements and the nephew's account, it was decided he should stay with the former brother-in-law. Overjoyed to live with his father, the nephew was now ensured a comfortable life. After the police interrogation, I returned to the hospital, resolved to stay by Mike's side. The next morning, Mike regained consciousness. Following his request, we got the detective to come over, and Mike revealed that he was pushed from behind by his sister. Forensics confirmed her handprints on the jacket he was wearing at the time. Confronted with undeniable evidence, the sister-in-law was arrested. Mike demanded compensation and medical expenses from her, but her financial situation was dire. Eventually, Mike proposed splitting his father's inheritance equally, ensuring compensation and medical expenses. The sister-in-law's money dwindled as she repeatedly fired lawyers, leading to a bleak trial. The nephew's emaciated body recovered, and custody was successfully secured by the former brother-in-law. They are now living peacefully with my ex-father-in-law and his parents. After Mike's discharge, I started feeling unwell, and a checkup revealed we were expecting a new life. We hope to raise our child to always smile and be kind, believing that our happiness is just beginning.
Aunt Rachel, are you sure about this? A few days after getting married and moving into our new home, I invited my beloved niece and her mother, my sister, to visit. During their visit, my niece said something that made us uneasy. "Hey now, kids shouldn't be messing with grown-ups." My husband quickly scolded her, his worry evident, but there was another reason why he was freaking out. "My name is Rachel, and I'm a 30-year-old pharmacist. I often look after my niece who lives nearby, and she has grown very attached to me. She's the cutest, and I end up spoiling her. Every time my sister picks her up, she complains, 'I know I'm the one who asked you to look after her, but you spoil her too much.' Of course, whenever she drops her off, she warns, 'Remember, you can't spoil a child when raising them.' But I always joke and reply that parenting is a mother's responsibility. That's how things go every day in my life. My sister is a nurse, so she's busy most of the time. She works in a well-paying hospital ward and also takes night shifts. On the other hand, as a pharmacist working at a drugstore, I have fixed working hours and no night shifts. I'm off on days without outpatient visits, and I don't have to be called in when the clinic is understaffed. So I often end up looking after my niece when my sister is busy. It might be because of her situation, but compared to kids her age, she is very calm and obedient. Girls are said to grow up faster than boys, but in her case, I think her family environment plays a significant role. I've been spending time with her to make sure she doesn't feel lonely, but now she has me wrapped around her finger. She's a quiet child who doesn't seek much attention, but she has this one ability that's hard for others to understand. For instance, when I tell her, "The park was empty today, wasn't it?" Time flew by quickly. Want to take a shortcut home? She would give an eerie response, saying, "Auntie Rachel, we shouldn't go that way. There's something bad there. Let's take the long way around." Incidents like this happen often. What bad thing? I've heard that children have heightened senses that allow them to see and hear things we can't, but is that for real? To be honest, I don't fully believe it. One day, a regular male customer at the pharmacy asked me out for lunch. When you hear regular at a pharmacy, you might think he's sick, but that's not necessarily true. This man got injured while working and is just getting treatment, so he's healthy overall. In the beginning, he visited frequently, and we casually chatted. His injury was healing well, and we were talking about him maybe not needing to come anymore when he asked me out for lunch. After a few lunch dates, he invited me out for dinner, and we had drinks at a rather fancy bar. I started to let my guard down with him and even shared some personal things about myself. It started to dawn on me that crossing that line into a relationship was just a matter of time. Then he proposed to me very passionately. "I want to get married to you right now. I can imagine my life without you, Rachel." Hearing him say that made me incredibly happy. I was overwhelmed by the realization that he needed me in his life, and I found no reason to reject him. So I accepted his proposal, feeling as if I were being drawn into it. To my surprise, he picked me up in front of everyone, laughing like a child. I found that side of him charming. "Let's have a ceremony just for the two of us right now," he suggested enthusiastically. He mentioned knowing someone in the bridal industry who could host and prioritize our wedding ceremony. While I was delighted, I still wanted to be blessed by our loved ones at our ceremony, so I turned down his suggestion. His disappointed face honestly made my heart ache, but I wanted our union to be blessed by others more than anything else, so I chose to stick with my decision. Even though he looked disappointed, he respected my feelings and withdrew his suggestion quite easily. That was another thing I liked about him. The very next day, which was the happiest day of my life, I shared the news of our engagement with my older sister before she went to work. Seeing her joy, as if it were her own, made me relieved that I didn't have to rush the ceremony. As I was happily recalling yesterday's events, he texted me saying he wanted to see me. When we first started dating, I remembered him mentioning that he had a younger sister. However, I was surprised to hear for the first time that his sister was hospitalized at the moment. When I asked why he hadn't told me earlier, he explained that he didn't want me to accept his marriage proposal out of sympathy for him. He also pointed out the possibility of the opposite happening. I assured him that I wouldn't make decisions based on his sister's illness, and his soft response of "I know" made me fall head over heels for him. But I still pulled myself together to stay grounded. He showed me a picture of his sister and told me, "When I told her about you, Rachel, she said she can't wait for the day when she can call you Big Sis." I felt a deep desire to make his sister's wish come true as soon as possible. "Holding my hand," he said, "let's become a family soon." I was moved once again. Even though we weren't married yet, I wasn't against the idea of being called Big Sis by his younger sister. I wanted to visit her in the hospital before we got married, but when I mentioned this to him, he said, "After I visited her the other day, her condition worsened and the doctors limited her visitation. Is it okay for you to be seeing me right now, in a time like this?" I asked. He responded by pulling out a charm from his jacket pocket. "All I can do is pray for my sister. I stopped by the church before I came here to see you, Rachel. There's nothing I can do besides praying for her." "Damn it," he expressed, frustration evident in his voice. Seeing him like this, I deeply wanted to support him. The next day, he suddenly stopped contacting me. I guess his sister's condition had worsened. I hoped he wasn't pushing himself too much. After about 3 days, his usual cheery self showed up at the pharmacy. Although he could have just texted me, he said he wanted to see me in person, which made me happy. We made plans to meet after we both got done with work. When I arrived at our rendezvous right on time, he was already there waiting. As I suspected, he explained that he had been by his sister's bedside due to her deteriorating condition. He told me she was still not allowed to have other visitors, but her condition was now stable, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Then he handed me a letter, saying it was from his sister. I was surprised. I didn't expect to receive a letter from her since I heard she was in critical condition. Reading my expression, he explained, "Seems like she's been writing a lot, and I didn't even know." He then shyly admitted, "Actually, I fell for you at first sight, so I had a crush on you for a long time." It turns out he had been talking about me even before we started dating. The letter contained words of hope for our relationship, dreams of her brother's love being fulfilled. "I hope the day comes when I get to call you Big Sis soon," she wrote. "I wonder if I could even be a flower girl," she wrote, dreaming of me marrying her brother and us becoming a family. Fighting an illness is hard. It's probably a struggle to even use her limited energy to wish for others' happiness, yet her letter was filled with thoughts of her brother getting married to me. Her words brought tears to my eyes. "Let's get married soon," I told him with excitement. It seemed unlikely that his sister would be able to attend our wedding, but I wanted her to witness her beloved brother's big day. After some insistence, I got him to reveal the name of the hospital she was staying at, and I found a wedding chapel nearby. The chapel was visible from the patient's room or the rooftop, making it feel like she could be there with us. I begged to have our ceremony there. He was touched to know that I genuinely cared about his sister, and he was fully on board with the idea. We soon fixed a date. Ideally, we wanted to choose one of those auspicious days, but we couldn't afford to be picky. The date we chose was less expensive and the only one available, so we went with it without hesitation. While preparations were hastily underway, he made a suggestion. He asked if we could wait a bit longer to turn in our marriage certificate. His sister's condition had worsened, and she needed surgery as soon as possible. The medical bill was going to be more expensive than expected, affecting our wedding budget. It didn't feel right to have a wedding under such circumstances either. When I suggested waiting until after his sister's surgery, he exclaimed, "If she found out our wedding was canceled because of her, it would ruin her will to heal." Hearing that, I couldn't say anything, and the wedding proceeded as planned. For the time being, I paid for our ceremony in one installment, under the agreement that we would split the costs after his sister's medical bills were paid. Despite the short notice, a decent number of our close friends and family managed to attend our wedding day. My own sister, who's a nurse, even managed to get time off with the help of her colleagues, saying, "This is an important day for my little sister." "I can't miss it," my cute little niece declared. Dressed up and joining the celebration, she quickly got shy around the grown men and ended up hiding behind me. Her actions were so adorable that I couldn't help but chuckle. After the wedding, I moved into our new home. He had suggested I move in with him since his place was too big for him alone. Given that his sister's surgery was going to cost more than we anticipated, we decided not to purchase a newly built home. I could support him for a while, but we couldn't predict when he'd be able to pay back the rest of our expenses. So, I moved into his place. My sister understood my decision but still felt it would be better if we had our own new place. To ease her concerns, I invited my sister and niece over. My boyfriend, now my husband, agreed to the idea. Upon visiting, my sister immediately began inspecting our house, showing her concern. "Hey, it's a bit rude to check every corner of our house, sis." "So, I see a 32-year-old CEO of an import company makes good money, huh? Are you satisfied now?" "Yes, I suppose so," she replied, and my husband and I let out a sigh of relief. The only downside was that moving here made it more difficult to frequently babysit or take care of my niece. It was too far for a 5-year-old to travel alone, and with my duties of nursing my husband's sister, I was too occupied. That's when my niece, out of the blue, said something eerie. "Rachel, I think you should leave this house." "Huh? Why?" "Because another woman is already living here." "Hey, even if you're a kid, there are things you should and shouldn't say." My husband angrily turned towards my sister, questioning her parenting. "Can you perhaps see her?" When my niece nodded yes, my husband's anger seemed to dissipate into fright. "My niece is quite sensitive. Perhaps you're not good with this kind of thing." No, that's not the issue. Kids shouldn't be messing with grown-ups." "I'm not messing with you. It's someone you know really well." A woman with her black hair always tied back, thin eyes, slightly overweight, with a mole near her eye. My husband's face turned pale. He was clearly scared, but it seemed like there was something more to it. What confirmed my skepticism was my niece's next question. "What's your real name, uncle? You use so many, have you forgotten it?" Even trembling, my husband raised his voice. "You little brat, don't spout nonsense." "Hey, don't yell at her just because you're scared." "Shut up." My husband shoved me away. He seemed more than just panicked with fear. Even if what my niece said was strange, it always turned out to be true. My usually gentle husband wouldn't change this drastically without reason. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just reacting out of fear. I whispered to my sister and asked her to check inside my husband's bag in the meantime. I decided to give up for the time being to get my husband's attention. "I'm sorry, my niece was out of line." "Huh, it's okay as long as you get it." Dang, my precious day off got ruined because of all this. He glared at my niece, but she wasn't bothered. She simply looked away with a stoic expression. "Oh yeah, you have a long business trip starting tomorrow, right?" I used soothing words to placate my husband. He gradually calmed down, and the topic of conversation shifted to what he should bring back for souvenirs. However, we didn't get to discuss the details. The reason was the name on the driver's license my sister found in his bag. It was a name I didn't recognize. Furthermore, she found multiple phones in his bag. "Rachel, your guy's probably sketchy. Aren't these burner phones?" "Burner phones? The kind used in scams and such. Exactly, registered under someone else's or even false names. It's illegal." "And what if it is?" "Thanks to that, Rachel's been eating well and enjoying fancy dates, hasn't she?" he said, as if I was his partner in crime. "Cut the crap. My sister is nothing like a piece of trash like you." My sister snapped back. My niece, still stoic, said, "There's a woman clinging to him like she'll never let him go." "Watch your mouth, kid. Even if you try to scare me, I won't fall for it again," he retorted. He seemed less fearful and more brazen now that his true identity was starting to be exposed. The fact that he wasn't trying to escape showed his confidence in not getting arrested. He seemed almost inwardly laughing, so assured he was, until the moment his world came crashing down. That moment came when several policemen burst in, shouting "police," and surrounded him. My sister had already found the driver's license and called the police before telling me. All our conversations had been overheard by them. There had already been several complaints filed by different women, and the man's description matched those provided. The police were eager to catch him in the act if possible, and the situation was ideal. My sister didn't want to let him escape and wanted to protect me. It was a miraculous arrest with our interests aligning in an instant. Since we hadn't formalized our marriage, the man had no legal claim over me. The man I had thought of as my husband was now just a criminal being taken away, and I could only watch in stunned silence. Later, during the police interrogation, he seemed to resign himself, or perhaps calculated that confessing would lighten his punishment. Without causing any further trouble for the police, he spoke surprisingly honestly. He admitted he intended to commit marriage fraud against me and drain me financially, likely for the medical bills of his non-existent sister. He also confessed to killing a woman he had previously dated during an argument about his true identity, which she had threatened to report to the police. Although he was frightened when my niece spoke up, he didn't seem to fully believe her, which might explain why he confessed. The police informed me of everything. The night he was taken away, he woke up in his cell choking with long hairs entwined around his neck. He confessed his wrongdoings, fearing he'd be cursed otherwise. When I asked him if it was true about the hair, he laughed and said, "Of course not." He insisted he had finger marks around his neck, but apparently he was the only one who could see them. It seems that some people, when they've committed a crime, are overwhelmed by guilt and resort to escapism. Yet, remembering the image of the woman my niece had described sent chills down my spine. As the investigation proceeded, according to the man's statement, a woman's skeleton was discovered in the woods. It made the news, and when the woman's photo was released, it matched my niece's description perfectly. My sister and I were filled with renewed fear. The man's fraudulent activities were also reported in the news, and more victims started to speak up. It seems like his list of crimes is only going to grow. The man was sentenced to severe punishment behind bars. Inside, he had to be terrified of the woman's spirit every day. I was simply astounded at my lack of judgment in having once decided to marry such a man. The trial for the incident in which I was victimized has ended, and I am finally free from everything. However, I've had enough of marriage. I moved back near my sister's house, so I'm still looking after my niece. Today, while I was dropping her off at my sister's house, I opened up to my sister about my hesitations toward marriage and love. She said, "You're just saying that now. You never know where or when you'll meet someone. You could fall in love after you leave here today." She didn't take it seriously. Time passed and summer came. Every year, I take my niece to the local summer festival. This year, as I was walking hand in hand with her dressed in her new sundress, a man walking in front of us dropped his wallet. I picked it up and tried to call out to him, but my voice didn't reach him due to the loud surrounding noise. I picked up my niece and jogged to catch up to him, returning his lost item. He thanked me and asked to treat us to something. This sparked a connection between us. In the end, the three of us had a blast at the fair that day. You're lucky, Rachel. You've been tied to this man before you were even born. What? Hey, what are you saying? I blushed deep red at her words, which seemed to make him blush as well. You never know where love will find you. My sister's words flashed in my mind as fireworks lit up the night sky. I had a feeling that a new romance was on the horizon.
Growing up, it was always clear to me that I stood apart from the rest of my family. My name is Jenny, and I hail from a lineage of restaurant owners. My father, Joe, is a commanding figure, overseeing our family restaurant with a strict hand. My mother, Linda, is his impeccable partner, constantly engrossed in managing the staff. Then there's my older brother, Mike, the golden boy groomed to inherit the family business. I recall a night at the dinner table, the air saturated with the savory scent of Dad's renowned roast. Mom enthusiastically shared details about a new recipe they were experimenting with. Jenny, you'll love this one. It has that fancy herb you adore. What's it called again? She asked, her eyes sparkling. Thyme, I mumbled, idly picking at my food. Mike, mouthful, laughed dismissively from across the table. Who cares about some dumb herb? Wait till you see the new grill Dad's getting for the restaurant. That's the real deal. Dad nodded, his gaze fixed on me. Speaking of the restaurant, Jenny, when are you going to start taking an interest? You're not getting any younger. Attempting to make myself inconspicuous in my chair, I responded, when I'm Dad. I like being outside with the plants and stuff. Mom sighed, exchanging a glance with Dad. Plants. What are you going to do with plants? You need a real job, Jenny, something to fall back on. A knot tightened in my stomach. It was the same conversation every time, but Grandma Rose understood. She lived in a small house surrounded by a breathtaking garden on the outskirts of town. Grandma Rose was different from my parents, gentle and patient. One day, as I found her in the garden, hands immersed in the soil, she smiled brightly. Jenny, dear, come help me plant these tulips. Sitting beside her, feeling the cool dirt on my hands, I confided, Grandma, why don't Mom and Dad understand? I love being here with the plants. Grandma Rose wiped her brow, looking at me with wise eyes. Your parents just want what's best for you, Jenny, but they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants in the earth. It's okay to be different. I clung to Grandma Rose's words, even as the pressure from my family intensified. High school graduation marked a crossroads. The house buzzed with excitement over Mike's plans to join Dad at the restaurant. Amidst it all, I felt like a spectator in my own life. One evening, as we gathered in the living room, Dad spoke passionately about expanding the restaurant, eyes gleaming with ambition. Mom turned to me, her voice sharp. And what about you, Jenny? Ready to step up? Handle the front desk, learn the ropes. Taking a deep breath, I mustered the courage to speak my truth. Actually, I'm not going to work at the restaurant. I'm going to study landscape design. The room fell silent. Dad's face turned red and he barked. Landscape what now? That's no career for you. You're a part of this family, and the restaurant is our legacy. Mike sneered. What are you going to do? Plant flowers for a living? My cheeks burned, but I held my ground. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm good at it, and I love it. Mom's expression wavered between confusion and concern. Jenny, be sensible. You can't make a living off playing in the dirt. I rose to my feet, a surge of defiance coursing through me. It's not just playing in the dirt, Mom. It's creating something beautiful, something real. I'm not asking for your approval, but I am telling you. This is my decision. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. If you choose this foolishness, you're on your own. Don't expect any help from us. And not tightened in my stomach, but my voice remained steady. Fine, I'll do it on my own. Grandma Rose, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Joe, let the girl follow her heart. She's got a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it. Her eyes fixed on Dad. Dad let out a frustrated grunt, turning away. Fine, do what you want, but don't come crying to us when it all falls apart. I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding. Mike called out after me, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Good luck, gardener. Let's see how far those flowers get you. Stepping into college life felt like diving into deep water, thrilling yet daunting. I, Jenny, was far from the familiar paths of my family's expectations, ready to carve my own way in the world of landscape design. I still remember the buzz of the first day in class, the room swirling with the energy of eager students. I found a spot in the back, trying to shrink into the shadows. That's when Zoe, a girl with fire engine red hair and eyes full of mischief, dropped into the seat next to me. Hey there, Nudie. I'm Zoe, a first-timer in landscape design. I gave a shy nod. Yeah, I'm Jenny. It's all a bit overwhelming. Zoe's laugh was loud and genuine. You'll fit right in. Wait till you get your hands into the real dirt. It's epic. What dragged you into this world? I hesitated, the disapproval of my family still fresh. I've always loved plants, the outdoors. It's where I feel right, you know. Her grin widened. Perfect place for you then. Classes were a whirlwind of learning and creating. I absorbed things like a sponge, from the science of soils to the art of design. I was finally speaking a language I loved. After one particularly intense session, Mr. Davidson, our professor, a man as tall and sturdy as an oak, called me over. Jenny, your designs, there's something else. You've got a real knack for this. His voice was serious but encouraging. I was stunned. Really? Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm just trying to do my best. He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. There's potential in you. Don't let it go to waste. Push harder. His words became my mantra. I started to live in the studio, my designs becoming more ambitious, more expressive. It was exhausting but exhilarating. But even in those moments of joy, a part of me yearned for my family. Despite everything, one quiet evening, I gathered the courage to call home. The phone rang, each tone heavy with anticipation. Finally, Mom's voice came through, sharp like a knife's edge. What? What do you want, Jenny? Her tone stung, but I pushed on. I just wanted to check in, see how everyone is. She snorted, her voice dripping with scorn. Oh, now you care, after running off to play in the dirt, abandoning your own family. I gritted my teeth, struggling to maintain a steady voice. I didn't abandon anyone, Mom. I just chose a different path. Her laugh was bitter. A dead-end path, you mean. Don't expect us to be here waiting when it all crumbles around you. The call ended, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. However, it also ignited a fire within me. I dove back into my work with renewed determination, intent on proving not only to my family but to myself that I was on the right path. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a phone call during my final year of college. It was Aunt Clara, my mom's sister, her voice shaky and strained. Jenny, it's about your Grandma Rose. She passed away last night. Aunt Clara's voice cracked with emotion, and I felt the ground slip away beneath me. Grandma Rose had been my rock, the one person who believed in my dreams. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair, my family stiff and formal. Dad, Mom, and Mike looked like strangers to me. After the service, I'd overheard Mom talking to Aunt Clara. I still can't believe she left that house to Jenny. What's she going to do with it? She can barely take care of herself. Mom's voice dripped with disapproval. I felt a surge of anger but bit my tongue, avoiding a confrontation. The will reading was a few days later. Grandma Rose had left me her house, the beautiful garden haven where I had spent countless hours. My family was shocked, their whispers sharp as thorns. Why would she leave it to Jenny? She's never around anyway, Mike muttered under his breath. Dad's face was like thunder. This is ridiculous. That house could have been sold. Put money into the restaurant. I stood up, my voice steady but firm. Grandma knew I loved that house, that garden. It was where we spent so much time together. I'm going to keep it, just as she wanted. Mom's response was cold and harsh. So you're just going to live there alone? Playing in the dirt? What a waste. Their words stung, but I had made up my mind. I moved into Grandma's house, immersing myself in the garden she had loved so dearly. I started renovating the place, pouring my heart into every plant, every flower bed. As the months passed, I transformed Grandma's garden into something truly special. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself away from the judgment and expectations of my family. The day the invitation to Mike's wedding arrived at my doorstep was a day of mixed feelings. It was a fancy piece of paper with golden letters against a white background, representing a part of my life I had left behind. Staring at it, a storm of emotions churned inside me. I decided to go, but on my terms. I dressed in a way that felt true to me, elegant but simple, a far cry from the dirt-stained clothes they remembered. Entering the restaurant, the sights and sounds of my past life engulfed me. I spotted my family across the room, Mom, Dad, and Mike, all decked out, looking like a picture-perfect family. Bracing myself, I walked over. Jenny, I didn't think you'd accept the invitation. Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. I came to see Mike get married. It's a family event, isn't it? I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Mike glanced at me, his smirk familiar and unwelcome. What's the matter? Ran out of bushes to trim? Decided to play dress up for a change. I felt a familiar sting, but I brushed it off. I'm just here to wish well, Mike. It was then that his bride, a tall woman with a haughty look, chimed in. Oh, this is the infamous gardener sister. Did you manage to scrub the dirt from under your nails, dear, or is it your natural look? Her words, sharp and mocking, hung in the air. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deep they cut. I clean up just fine, thanks for asking. Congratulations to you both. Dad's eyes were cold, his voice colder. Your being here doesn't erase the past, Jenny. You chose your path. Their words were like thorns, but I had grown a thick skin. I'm not here to rehash old arguments, just wanted to wish Mike a happy married life. I was quickly ushered to a small table in the corner, away from the family. Sitting there, I could feel the curious stares and hushed whispers. That's the gardener, they whispered, the black sheep of the family. But as I sat there, a sense of pride welled up in me. Yes, I was the gardener, the one who had dared to follow her own path. I was no longer the shy, unsure girl they remembered, but a woman who had found her strength, who had bloomed in spite of them. My discomfort only grew as the evening stretched on. Sipping my drink, I tried to make myself invisible. But that plan fell apart when I caught the eye of some guys I knew from childhood. Mike's friends, the same ones who used to join him in mocking me. Look who's here, the family's little dirt digger, one of them, Jake, sneered as they approached, a smirk plastered on his face. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Actually, it's a landscape designer, but I wouldn't expect you to understand the difference. Their laughter was harsh, grating. Oh, listen to her. Thinks she's all high and mighty now, Chris added with a scoff. I bit back a sharp retort, my hands clenching under the table. I've worked hard for my success. My job is more than just playing in the dirt. Their amusement was cut short when an elderly man at the next table interjected. He had been listening, his expression growing increasingly disapproving. I've seen this young lady's work, the new park downtown. That's hers. It's outstanding, shows what you know. The group was visibly taken aback, their smugness faltering. Muttering under their breath, they slunk away, their egos bruised. Emboldened, I decided to venture out from my safe corner, mingling through the crowd, dodging glances and whispers. That's when I overheard Mike speaking to a group of his friends. She's always been the odd one, more into her plants than real work, Mike said, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and disdain. His friend laughed loudly. Every family's got its black sheep, huh? Their words were like a slap, raw and stinging. I walked away, my heart pounding, reminding myself their opinions didn't define me. As I weaved through the crowd, I bumped into my cousin Lucy, a quiet presence in our loud family. "Hey, Jenny, I've seen some of your designs. They're really something," she said, her voice sincere. I managed a small smile. "Thanks, Lucy. It means a lot, especially today." Lucy looked at me, her eyes understanding. "I never agreed with how they treated you. You're doing amazing things. I'm glad you stuck to your path." Her words were a small comfort amidst the thorns of the evening. We chatted briefly, a momentary respite from the tension. As Lucy drifted away, I returned to my corner, feeling the weight of the evening. The loud music, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter around me felt like they were happening in a different world. I sat there, sipping my drink, longing for the celebration to end. The wedding night was winding down, its fancy aura overshadowed by my own tangled feelings. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more surreal, the mayor, a distant relative of Mike's bride, took the stage for his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here," he began, his voice booming across the room. "But tonight, I want to highlight a special guest among us, a true star in the world of landscape design, Jenny." Hearing my name, I nearly choked on my drink. I stood up hesitantly, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. The mayor beamed at me. "Jenny here is the brilliant mind behind the transformation of our city park. She's a celebrated landscape designer who's won multiple awards for her incredible work. Let's give her the recognition she deserves." The room erupted into applause, a sound that felt foreign to me. I glanced at my family's table and saw their faces, a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mike's bride leaned towards him, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Is he talking about your sister, the gardener?" Mike mumbled something, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him up. The mayor's praise continued. "Jenny's work has revitalized our city. She's a true talent." Amidst the clapping, I felt a surge of confidence. The mayor's words were like a light, dispelling the shadows of doubt and scorn from my family. Seizing the moment, I decided to speak up. "Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's an honor to contribute to our city's beauty." I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd, settling on my family. It's funny, isn't it? How life turns out. Mike, you and your bride are perfect for each other. Your shared talent for rudeness to others is quite remarkable. The room went silent, the air thick with tension. My parents, my brother, and his fiancée blushed deep red, their shame as visible as if I'd slapped them. Mom's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. "Jenny, what are you saying? This is your brother's wedding." I met her gaze unflinching. "Just speaking the truth, Mom, something our family seems to struggle with." Mike stood up, his face red with anger. "You can't come here and talk to us like that." I held my ground, my voice steady. "I've earned my right to speak, Mike. Maybe it's time you all listened." The confrontation ended with Mike sitting down defeated, and the room slowly buzzing back to life. The mayor gave me a nod of respect before moving on. As I sat back down, the weight of the night lifted slightly. I had spoken my piece, stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was no longer just the gardener or the outcast. I was Jenny, a recognized landscape designer, someone who had grown past her family's narrow expectations. After Mike's wedding, word got out about my success as a landscape designer. People were buzzing about the awards I'd won and the projects I'd aced. It felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. And then my family came calling. One afternoon, while I was busy sketching out a new garden design, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice had a sweetness to it that felt out of place. "Jenny, darling, we've been hearing so much about your work. Your father and I are so proud of you." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's a change of tune." There was a pause on the line. "Well, we were thinking maybe you could come over. We'd love to see you, catch up on things." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Catch up or catch onto my bank account? I shot back, "Mom, that's not fair. We're family." The word family hit a nerve. Family like when you all but disown me for following my dreams. It seems like family matters when there's money in the picture. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I wasn't about to let them back into my life just because they smelled success. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Mike was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. "Hey, Jenny, can we talk?" He mumbled. I crossed my arms. This should be good. "What do you want, Mike?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know we haven't been great, but you're doing well. I was wondering if you could, help me out a bit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out after years of calling me the gardener and laughing at my ambitions? Mike's face reddened. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just that things are tough." I cut him off. "Save it, Mike. I'm not your ATM. You and the family made it clear how you felt about me. You can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient." He opened his mouth to argue, but I stopped him. "No, Mike. You made your bed. Now lie in it." After he left, I sat in my garden surrounded by the beauty I had created. My phone rang a few more times over the next week, more attempts at reconciliation from my family, but I didn't answer. I was done with their fair weather affection. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't need their validation or their greed. I was thriving in my own right, and that was all that mattered. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As I looked around at the plants and flowers that were a testament to my hard work and passion, I realized I had everything I needed right here. I was happy, successful, and free from the toxic ties that had once bound me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new book, my book. And I was going to make sure it was a bestseller, written on my own terms, in my own style. The new growth in my life was just starting, and I was ready for whatever came next. People like you, with no job and a limited education, are not welcome in this household. With those words, my mother-in-law poured scalding water on me. "It's hot, please stop." I involuntarily screamed, shocked by her bizarre behavior. Pouring boiling water on anyone is inexcusable. Fortunately, I suffered no burns, but it could have been a disaster. I couldn't believe my mother-in-law would resort to such extremes. Moreover, it wasn't me but my husband who was unemployed. A growing anger towards my mother-in-law's attitude surged within me. Enough is enough. If she's gone this far, I'll do as she wishes. Understood. If you insist, I have no choice. I'll leave this house, I declared. Finally, you're leaving. That makes things easier for me. My mother-in-law expressed joy, far from being remorseful. I no longer wanted to stay in such a hostile environment. I promptly packed my things and returned to my parents' home. My mother-in-law didn't know that my husband, Raffel, was unemployed or that I had been supporting the household finances. In fact, since quitting my job, I had started trading stocks and was earning about $30,000 a month. Even if I was driven out of her house, I could still live on my own without any issues. I wouldn't have any qualms being on my own. Even if she came to me in tears, struggling with living expenses, I would never lend a hand. She should regret kicking me out like this. I had married Raphael about 2 years ago. We were from the same university and had been dating since then. Both of us, graduates of the economics department, aspired to work in finance and managed to secure jobs at different brokerage companies after graduation. Despite our busy days, we maintained our relationship. 3 years later, Raphael proposed. "Julia, I will definitely make you happy. Marry me." Believing that I could be happy with Raphael, I accepted. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. We decided to get married, thinking we could build a happy family together. However, Raphael then dropped an unexpected bomb. "Hey, Julia, would you quit your job and live with me at my parents' house?" "What? I don't mind quitting my job, but we're newlyweds. I'd like to live with just the two of us. I'm just worried about leaving my mother alone. I'll make sure it won't be a burden to you." Raphael's father had passed away when he was in middle school, and since then, he had lived with his mother. Being an only child, Raphael was concerned about her. Understanding his feelings, I agreed. Okay, I'll live with you. 2 weeks later, we moved into Raphael's family home. My mother-in-law, now able to live with Raphael, initially greeted us with a pleased expression. However, as soon as she looked at me, her expression clouded. She stared at me coldly, making it painfully clear that I was not welcomed. It doesn't matter. You didn't have to come here. What did I mishear? I thought I heard my mother-in-law muttering something under her breath, but I couldn't make it out clearly. I smiled and brushed it off. At this point, I began to feel a bit anxious about living with her. However, the day passed without any particular issues. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my mother-in-law yelling at me. Are you still sleeping? Hurry up and prepare breakfast. When I looked at the clock by my bed, it was still before dawn, around 4:00 a.m., and it was still dark outside. I was surprised that she would demand breakfast so early. Why so early? Don't just laze around because you're not working. My mother-in-law scolded me, still groggy from sleep. I thought it was way too early in the morning, but I couldn't argue back and started preparing breakfast. Even while preparing breakfast, my mother-in-law kept berating me. Hurry up! Why does it take you so long? You're so slow. After 30 minutes, breakfast was finally ready. I'm sorry for making you wait. You finally finished. Can't you make it faster? My mother-in-law complained again. I wanted to retort that it was physically impossible to do it any faster, but I just smiled and shrugged it off. What is this? This soup is too salty. What is it? I don't think it's that salty. What are you saying? There's something wrong with my taste? Are you trying to kill me quickly by feeding me such salty meals? I never thought or intended such a thing. What is she talking about, and why is she so harsh on me? Curious, I mustered the courage to ask my mother-in-law. Why are you so harsh on me? What are you talking about? I don't think I'm being harsh. Or are you trying to make me the bad guy? No, that's not what I mean. I was overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's pressure and couldn't talk back. Finish eating. Start cleaning. After that, there's laundry to do, so there's no time to rest. Since then, every day, I was continually harassed by my mother-in-law, wearing me down both mentally and physically. While I was cleaning, she would say things like, "You missed the dust in the corner." When I was doing laundry, she'd complain, "There's still a stain." A month after starting to live with her, I felt like I was going to break. So I talked to Raphael about it. It's about your mother. She's been saying mean things to me every day, and it's hard. Could you please tell her not to say such things? But Raphael showed no reaction. I was momentarily irritated by Raphael's lack of response. But then I noticed something strange about him. He was pale, as if he had something important to say. What's wrong? Did something happen? When I asked, Raphael hesitantly began to speak. Actually, I've been fired from the company. What is this? Some kind of joke? I was speechless, unable to comprehend. There was a downsizing at the company, and I got laid off, according to Raphael. Due to recent economic downturns, the company's profits had plummeted, leading to unavoidable large-scale layoffs. So you'll be unemployed from tomorrow. Well, I can work for 1 more month after receiving the notice of dismissal. But after that, fortunately, I had been using my knowledge from my time at the securities company to trade stocks. Although I struggled at first, I was now earning about $30,000 a month, so we weren't struggling financially. I was comforting Raphael and had forgotten about all the harassment from my mother-in-law. From the next day onwards, I endured my mother-in-law's harsh treatments as Raphael lost his job. Feeling the need to be strong and support him, I continued to endure the situation. A month passed, and Raphael was officially laid off and became unemployed. He started looking for a job initially, but gradually he began to spend most of his time at home, making excuses. Shouldn't you start looking for a job more seriously? I suggested. Yeah, I'm looking, but it's hard to find a good company that will suit me, Raphael replied, seemingly having no intention of actively seeking new employment. Reluctantly, I continued to support our household. As time passed, the harassment from my mother-in-law intensified, and I grew increasingly exhausted. Initially, I thought I had to endure it because Raffle was unemployed, but I no longer felt that way. I spent my days feeling listless. One day, Raffle unusually went out in the morning. Perhaps he had finally started to seriously look for a job. After seeing him off, I started cleaning as usual. Make sure it's clean. Do it properly. My mother-in-law sipped coffee on the living room sofa, hurling sarcasm at me. Fed up, I ignored her. Suddenly, she threw a tantrum and yelled at me. "How dare you ignore me? You're just a mere daughter-in-law. You don't even have a job." Ignoring her, I continued cleaning. She grew angrier and confronted me. "Still ignoring me? Unemployed and uneducated people like you should leave this house." She yelled and then poured boiling water on me, the hot water she had prepared for her coffee. "It's hot? Please stop." I screamed involuntarily at her sudden action. Thankfully, the water wasn't super boiling hot, so I didn't suffer any burns, but it could have been a disaster. Finally reacting, she said, "This is what I've been saying. If you're not working, leave this house." She smirked as she spoke. Fed up with her behavior, I had no choice but to agree to her demand. "All right, I'll leave." "Good. That makes things easier. Leave quickly." I quickly packed my things and decided to leave that day. I no longer wanted to spend another second in that house. I left, heading straight to my parents' home. Upon arrival, my parents were surprised by the sudden visit, but welcomed me warmly. I waited for a call from Raphael, but there was neither a phone call nor a message. Feeling a bit lonely, I decided not to contact him until he reached out. A month passed since I returned to my parents' house, but there was still no contact from Raphael. My feelings for him faded, and I started considering divorce. One early morning, the doorbell at my parents' house rang. On the monitor, I saw, to my surprise, Raphael and my mother-in-law. What now, after all this time? I thought. "Yes, what can I do for you?" "I've forgiven you. Now come back home quickly," she yelled through the intercom as usual. Forgiving me? What's she talking about? I appreciated her words, but I hadn't done anything that required forgiveness from her. After telling her that, I ended the intercom call, boiling with anger at my mother-in-law's attitude. However, they were persistent, banging on the front door violently. "Don't just hang up on me. Come on, let's go back," my mother-in-law yelled. Considering the noise they were making could become a hassle to the neighborhood, I reluctantly opened the door, inviting my mother-in-law and Raphael inside after seating them on the sofa in the living room. I inquired about their unexpected visit, wondering why they were both there all of a sudden. It was my mother-in-law who had insisted that I leave, and now she was telling me to come back. The situation was perplexing, and I couldn't make any sense of it. "You're the one who told me to leave. There's no way I can go back now," I asserted. My mother-in-law responded with frustration, accusing me of childish behavior and claiming to have forgiven me. She insisted that I return and stay in her house, even stating that she'd let me, an unemployed and uneducated person, stay there. But I'm not the unemployed one, it's Raphael. And if I go back, they'll take advantage of me every day. I might not be working, but what about your son, huh? I retorted. Raphael seemed surprised at this revelation. My mother-in-law appeared confused, indicating that Raphael hadn't informed her about his layoff. Pressed further, Raphael finally admitted to being laid off from the company. Apologies and explanations ensued, with Raphael justifying his actions by relying on my income for financial stability. My mother-in-law, shocked at the news, openly expressed anger toward Raphael for not finding a job yet. "Why did you keep quiet about this? What are we going to do now?" she scolded him. Raphael assured her that my income would suffice for the time being, causing my mother-in-law to label him as worthless for not actively seeking employment. Fed up with Raphael's excuses, I couldn't believe that I had ever thought of supporting him. When my mother-in-law suggested I come back, I vehemently rejected the idea, considering all the mistreatment I had endured. Their unexpected visit had turned into a heated argument, revealing the truth about my mother-in-law pouring boiling water on me. Raffle was shocked to learn about this incident and confronted his mother. "Why did you do that?" he asked her. She admitted to the act, attributing it to my ignoring her. The revelation sparked a heated exchange between Raphael and his mother, prompting me to intervene and urge them to take their arguments home. Realizing the impact of their loud arguments on someone else's house, my words prompted a change in their attitudes. Previously assertive and bold, they now pleaded with me to come back, promising that they wouldn't cause any harm again. Despite their pleas, I saw through their intentions. Raffle's promise to find a job seemed insincere, and my mother-in-law's assurance not to cause trouble appeared dubious. I voiced my skepticism, stating that their words were pointless and that they would only take advantage of me. Their silence confirmed my suspicions, and I left them in the living room, heading to my room, leaving them to contemplate their actions. When I returned to the living room 5 minutes later, they were still sitting in silence with their heads down. Frustrated by the prolonged silence, I questioned, "How long do you plan to stay quiet? It doesn't matter to me anymore." Instead of a response, Raffle signed something. I had handed him a pre-filled divorce form with my name on it. Surprised by the document, Raffle looked utterly confused. I bluntly explained, "Can't you see it's a divorce form? I'm done with someone who won't find a job and didn't even contact me after I went back to my parents' house." "Do wait, please. This is too sudden," Raffle protested. I found his stubbornness irritating, as he seemed oblivious to the fact that his actions were the root cause of our problems. Unmoved, I affirmed, "I've made up my mind. My decision to divorce you won't change, no matter what you say." Raffle, still in disbelief, questioned if divorce was too harsh. Coldly, I responded, "I don't think so. It's your fault." I directed the same coldness toward my mother-in-law, who was partly to blame. Resigned to the situation, Raffle signed the divorce form, warning me not to regret it. However, I felt a sense of relief, and I asserted that the one who might regret it was Raffle. "I'll submit the divorce form. I don't want any compensation. Just go home," I declared, finalizing my divorce from Raffle. Though it may have seemed harsh, it was necessary to escape the harassment from my mother-in-law and Raffle's unemployment. 2 weeks later, while relaxing at my parents' house, I received a call from my ex-mother-in-law. She informed me that the electricity and gas had been cut off and questioned if I had done something. I explained that I had stopped paying for Raffle and her living expenses. Hoping for my assistance, she asked if I could cover it just for the month. I found her request absurd, considering we were no longer a couple and didn't live together. I firmly declined, suggesting she ask Raffle for help, as he had promised to find a job. Unable to comprehend my refusal, she pleaded for help, playing the ex-wife card. However, I remained firm, ending the call and blocking her number. Finally, I severed ties with both my ex-mother-in-law, who constantly harassed me, and Raffle, who had proven to be unreliable. Life at my parents' house became peaceful, and I focused on rebuilding my life. Months later, while checking stock charts on a holiday, I received a message from Raffle. He apologized for everything, acknowledging his reliance on me and the recent job at a factory. Despite the apology, I had no intention of getting involved with them again. Raffle mentioned his mother's continued harshness and expressed a desire for me to come back. Reading the message, I believed reconciliation was unlikely. I blocked Raffle's number. 6 months after the divorce, I started dating a man introduced by a friend. He was reliable, treated me well, and despite the age difference, we connected. While marriage was not on the immediate horizon, I cherished the happy times we spent together, focusing on the present and leaving the past behind.
My name is Mary. I turned 35 this year on a warm summer day when birds were chirping happily. One day, I was asked to go to the president's office. The president is actually my mom. I'd accidentally called her mom instead of boss because I was surprised. She seemed annoyed by the heat and didn't even look at me when she spoke. She said she's giving the company to my sister and firing me. It was hard to believe what I heard because the sun was so bright. I probably looked really shocked. My mom, looking frustrated, finally looked at me and repeated that I'm fired because she doesn't want me around since I'm not as attractive as my sister. She said I had to leave by the end of the month. Then she went back to her work as if our conversation was over. I felt confused and hurt as I sat there, listening to the birds outside. My mom even scolded me for still being there and told me to go back to work. I walked away from the office feeling like a robot, saying excuse me as I left and closing the door behind me. Our company is pretty small, just a 2-story building, and we're in the demolition business with about 10 people working here. It's a family business, with my mom as the president, my aunt and her husband as the top managers, and my mom's cousins as other important managers, but my mom always had the most control. After I finished high school, I got a job at an accounting firm. But when I turned 25, my mom said we needed an accountant at our family business. She basically guilted me into joining, saying I shouldn't abandon my family. And when I started, I didn't just do accounting work. My mom gave me all sorts of jobs, from paperwork to sales, whenever we were short-staffed. Basically, I did a bit of everything at the company. Even though the work was tough, I tried my best not to be a burden to anyone. I worked long hours and somehow managed to keep up with everything for the past 10 years. On the other hand, my sister Lucy, who was supposed to take over the company, is 3 years younger than me at 32, and she only started working here 2 years ago. Lucy had been jumping from one job to another, always saying they weren't right for her. When she turned 30, she stopped looking for work and spent her days relaxing at home. Then, my mom decided Lucy should work at our family business and made her an executive director. Even though I've been working at the company for 10 years, I'm still just a regular employee. Everyone noticed how differently my sister and I were treated, but I wasn't surprised. My mom has always liked Lucy more, even when we were kids. She gave Lucy all the nice clothes and toys she wanted and always said how cute she was. But I got hand-me-downs and wasn't paid much attention to. As a child, I didn't understand why my mom treated us differently. I worked hard in school and helped out at home, hoping to get her attention. But even when I got top grades, she barely noticed. At one point, I even thought about getting plastic surgery because I believed that if I looked prettier, my mom would pay more attention to me. But my aunt, who is my mom's sister, saw me feeling this way and explained why my mom ignored me so much. When I was in high school, I was told that my dad had died. But the truth was, when Lucy was born, my dad left my mom for another woman from his job. This woman was older than my mom and supposedly not as pretty, but she had a similar vibe to me. My aunt told me that my mom was too proud to admit that my dad left her for someone who wasn't as attractive as she was. She seemed kind of satisfied telling me this, like she enjoyed seeing my mom in a tough spot. My aunt wasn't particularly stunning herself. She took more after our side of the family, but she was good at her job and often used her charm to get ahead. My mom took over the family business when she was 32, after my dad left. She used her looks to attract and keep lots of clients, which really helped the business grow. Plus, there was a lot of demand for demolition work at that time because many buildings needed tearing down. So my aunt's family and my cousins couldn't really stand up to my mom. Lately, the cost of getting rid of industrial waste and moving it around has gone up, and it's been hard to balance how much it costs to demolish buildings with what we actually make. Our company isn't the only one struggling. The whole industry is having a tough time. It's been a challenge just to pay our employees every month. And now, my younger sister has joined the company as an executive director, adding to the mix. I wondered how my mom planned to pay my sister's salary, but she just said, "We'll cut your pay to cover hers. We're family, so it's natural, right?" I pointed out that even if they cut my pay, it wouldn't be enough to give my sister the salary of an executive director. But my mom didn't care. She told me it was my problem to figure out. I timidly suggested that maybe my sister should start as a regular employee. My mom gave me a harsh look and scolded me, saying, "Who do you think you're talking to? This isn't your business to interfere with." At that time, we all lived together. My sister didn't contribute anything to the household, while I paid $1,500 each month to help out. I've been helping around the house since I was young to support my busy mom, but my sister never did anything, acting like it was normal. "Hey sis, is dinner ready yet?" Lucy would ask when I was working late. When I told her to make her own food because I was busy, she'd say, "But I don't know what to cook. You're the one who knows the kitchen best, right?" I don't want to get in trouble for using it without asking like last time. She never bothered to try cooking. Instead, she used that past argument as an excuse to avoid doing anything around the house. So, I often had to rush home to cook dinner before going back to work. My mom usually didn't cook either. Even when I made meals, she often ate out, choosing whatever she wanted. Lately though, she was going out to eat with Lucy more, so I didn't have to cook as often. But now, we were spending more money on entertainment, which was causing new problems. My mom, who was now 63, was starting to complain more about feeling sore and the effects of drinking too much. It was around this time that I was called into the CEO's office and told, "I'm giving the company to Lucy. You, who aren't as pretty, are fired." I could understand why my mom chose Lucy to take over the company, considering her past behavior. Lucy was 32, the same age my mom was when she became the CEO. Maybe my mom thought Lucy could use her looks to get things done, just like she did. But I couldn't accept being fired because of how I look. Even if my salary went to Lucy, it didn't seem fair. When I talked to my aunt about it, she already knew Lucy was going to be the CEO, but she didn't know I was getting fired. After thinking about it, my aunt said, "I'm not sure, but it seems like Lucy doesn't like that whenever she says she'll do something at the company. Everyone says it's okay because they know Mary will help. Maybe that's part of the reason." No, it's because everyone stopped asking Lucy for help since she always does a messy job, right? Lucy was really bad at her job. She often missed deadlines, messed up phone calls, and made lots of mistakes in her work. Even though she had some experience, she didn't seem to realize how bad she was. Maybe because people always overlooked her mistakes because she was pretty, she never thought about improving. My aunt agreed, saying, "That's true, but I think Lucy sees you as a bother." She added sadly, "But I never imagined they'd fire you. Without you, the company won't be able to work properly." She seemed worried, but didn't argue with my mom because she knew she wouldn't win. I felt disgusted knowing my aunt was related to me by blood. "So basically, both my mom and sister hate me, right?" I said bitterly. My aunt didn't know what to say, so she suggested, "Well, your mom is terrible, but maybe you'd be better off working somewhere else with all your skills. It's a waste to stay here." Standing in the car, bathed in the red glow of the summer evening, I stared into the distance and felt a sense of relief. Maybe it was okay to let go. I turned to my aunt and said, "You're right," with a big smile on my face. It was the first time I'd smiled genuinely since I started working at the company. My aunt looked a bit confused by my smile, but she returned a sad smile. As I worked on handing over documents and organizing files so that anyone could understand them, the end of the month came quickly. When I went to the CEO's office to resign on time, the sound of birds was gone, and my mom and sister were happily chatting. "That sales guy definitely has a crush on you." "You, that bald guy?" "No way." They laughed loudly, not realizing I was there. When I cleared my throat, they finally noticed me. My sister looked at me curiously and said, "What's up?" "We don't need dinner tonight. I'm quitting today." "Thanks for everything," I told them. "Oh, was it today?" "I forgot." My sister laughed again. I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to see them anymore. "I'm moving out too, so take care," my mom replied mechanically with no emotion. I closed the door, and from inside, I heard my sister say, "Now we won't have to deal with that annoying face anymore." In my heart, I whispered, "Just you wait," and left the company I'd been at for so long. A week later, after finishing some paperwork for school, I checked my phone and saw 14 missed calls from my mom in just 2 hours. I didn't call her back because I had a bad feeling about it. I put my phone on silent and went home after finishing my other tasks. The missed calls from my mom kept piling up, and when I checked the next morning, there were a total of 80 missed calls. The last one was after 2 a.m. But I didn't even consider calling her back. She was like a stranger to me now, and I didn't want to hear her voice at all. I even had thoughts that if I heard her voice, I might end up doing what she wanted. After all, she had controlled me for 35 years. So I ignored her calls with all my strength, trying to break free from her influence. I could have blocked her number, but I thought keeping the calls might be evidence of her behavior if something happened. At first, getting almost 100 calls a day was tough, and I hated seeing them come in. But over time, I started feeling satisfied, imagining my mom's frustration with each unanswered call. It made me realize just how badly she had treated me. The year went by like this, and eventually the calls from my mom stopped. I had no idea what was going on with her. During this time, I worked part-time while studying online to become a tax professional, and I passed all the exams. I recently got a job at a top tax consulting firm. My experience in the very tasks I did at my mom's company helped me see the bigger picture, which was a big advantage in my new job. I was grateful for all the hard work I'd done at my old company over the past 10 years, especially now. The people at my new job are great, and we all work together well. It's a big change from my old job. When I was left to figure things out on my own, pushed around by my mom and sister, I spent countless nights researching and working alone. One day, while I was leading a fulfilling life, I had to visit a client near my mom's company. As I passed by, I noticed the windows were dirty and the plants I used to care for were withered. On my way back, I bumped into my mom coming out of her company. When she saw me, she shouted, "Ah!" and rushed towards me. Expecting her to scold me, I instinctively covered my face with my bag. But to my surprise, she spoke to me in a sweet tone, asking where I'd been and if I changed my phone. It seemed like she hadn't even considered that I might not want to talk to her because I disliked her. Given everything she'd done to me, I couldn't help but wonder about her thought process. Ignoring my confusion, she continued, "Oh, but it's a good thing I saw you. Look at the state of this company. It's awful, isn't it? You can start working here again from tomorrow. I'm not mad, you know. So I forgive you for leaving a year ago. Please come back to work tomorrow." It took me a moment to process what my mom had just said. Did she only see me as a little child who adored her? Mom, I'm already working at another company, and I'm happy there, I said hesitantly. But instead of understanding, her face twisted into anger, and she yelled, "What? You're telling me you're working somewhere else while our company is struggling? I don't care about other companies, you belong to me, got it?" Causing a scene in the street. "Wait a minute, you're the one who fired me, remember? What about Lucy? What happened to her?" I asked. My mom snorted and said, "Oh, Lucy. I thought she'd be useful, but she got caught having affairs with 3 men from our main client. Our business with them ended quickly. I tried putting her in clerical work, but she couldn't even clean properly and was useless at accounting. Because of her, we couldn't even hire someone else." After venting her frustrations, my mom turned to me with a grin. "That's why it's your turn, Mary. Ever since you left, the office has been a mess. I need you to take responsibility." I had made a thorough handover manual before leaving and explained everything to Lucy. But I doubted Lucy had even looked at it, and I was sure my mom hadn't heard anything about it either. And even if she did, she'd probably pretend to forget. I couldn't understand why they fired me and then expected me to clean up their mess. This was typical of these women. They acted tough, blamed others, and made others clean up after them. It was their usual trick. I bit my lip, thinking of the kind people I worked with now, and I swore to myself that I wouldn't succumb to this pressure anymore. "You're the one who fired me, right?" I said to my mom, my tone changing. "And you fired me because I'm not pretty, isn't that right?" A crowd had gathered around us, intrigued by our argument. My mom seemed startled by my sudden assertiveness. "Did I say that? Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" she stammered, aware of the onlookers. "No, I heard it loud and clear. You're giving the company to my beautiful sister and firing me, the ugly one," I declared boldly. "I don't get it. I've been working hard at the company for 10 years, but you suddenly decide to give the company to my sister, who hardly does any work, after just 2 years. Your judgment is questionable," I stated firmly. The crowd started to murmur in response. "Can that really happen? That's not fair. Are they even related? Is she her own mother?" Some even started filming us, but I was too angry to care. As my mom began to sweat and pale under the accusing stares, she panicked. "Mary, you're misunderstanding. Let's go inside," she urged. "Misunderstanding? What's there to misunderstand? If you didn't say it, just say it clearly," I retorted. When my mom stayed silent, the people around us started saying, "She's silent, so it must be true. That's unbelievable." Then something snapped in my mom. She started yelling, "Shut up. It's all your fault for being ugly and miserable. Ugly people should know their place and obey what beautiful people say. That's all you're good for." People around us were shocked by my mom's outrageous behavior and quickly started uploading their videos. The headlines read, "Ugly woman obeys beautiful woman." The video went viral, reaching my mom's clients, who promptly cut ties with her. It turned out that in the year after I left the company, they were involved in shady activities like fraud and tampering with accounting books. When the video spread, everyone was eager to distance themselves. As a result, the company went bankrupt. My mom and sister, now without income, came to my apartment, but I didn't let them in. In the end, they moved to a rundown apartment without a bath, living in fear of creditors. My sister, always trying to take it easy by flirting with male coworkers, had trouble keeping part-time jobs because her coworkers didn't like her. Meanwhile, everyone knew about the viral video, so my mom was also shunned by her coworkers. It seems she's now silently working by herself. Meanwhile, I found a boyfriend at my new workplace. He's not conventionally handsome, but he appreciates my hard work and sincerity. We're planning to get married soon. I'm genuinely happy knowing that my efforts have paid off.
Tonight, I had planned to unwind at a play, but my mother-in-law had different ideas. She arrived unexpectedly, accompanied by 9 friends, assuming they could all stay at my house while I was out. Despite my prior plans, she insisted on leaving their belongings at my place and asked if I could prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for everyone, as if my evening was theirs to commandeer. Caught off guard by her audacity and the necklace she wore, a piece I held dear, my frustration boiled over. I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm actually about to leave for a trip," I informed her, watching her surprise unfold. That was the breaking point. After enduring her relentless demands, I finally asserted myself. "Please return that necklace." It was time to establish the respect and boundaries I had long overlooked. My name is Julie, a 32-year-old who transitioned from an administrative role to teaching computer classes after getting married. My husband, Eric, manages his father's company and often seems preoccupied with its challenges. Our cherished moments together, like movie dates, bring him visible relief, a sight that warms my heart. Although I've always been more of a listener than a talker, Eric encourages me to voice my thoughts more confidently. My older brother has always been protective, which I once found stifling. Now, I see it as a form of support, much like what Eric provides. Eric's brother serves as vice president of their father's company, and his wife, Catherine, who is about my age, is also part of our intertwined lives. Catherine has always been someone I admire, ambitious, dependable, and kind-hearted. What truly stands out about her is her assertiveness and the way she confidently expresses her views, coupled with a remarkable ability to be understanding and adaptable. Witnessing her stand up to our mother-in-law was nothing short of impressive. Unfortunately, Catherine and her husband live quite far away, which means I don't see her as often as I'd like, a fact I often regret. On the other hand, my mother-in-law carries herself as if she owns the company. As the president's wife, she exudes confidence, but her stubbornness and arrogance are unmistakable. She frequently pressures me, insisting, "Julie, you're Eric's wife, the president. You should quit your job as a computer instructor and fully support your husband." While Eric stands by my choices, her dissatisfaction is palpable, and I'm thankful we don't live too close to her. I've always envisioned a simple, peaceful life with Eric, perhaps even with children in the future. However, everything changed when Eric's father unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack. It was a shock to us all, leaving Eric and his brother to navigate the future of the family business. During this turbulent time, Eric decided to relocate to Philadelphia to work at the company's main office, while his brother stepped up as the new president, with Eric becoming vice president. We found a cozy house in Philadelphia, slightly removed from the hustle and bustle and a bit far from the nearest train station, but it promised a peaceful, sunlit life. With all the changes at work, Eric often came home late, so I took it upon myself to ensure our home was a warm and welcoming place. I prepared healthy meals to support Eric during these challenging times, and as the weeks turned into a month, his appreciation for my efforts became increasingly evident. "I'm back. I'm starving," he would announce as he entered the house, to which I would respond with a smile. "Thanks for working so hard. I'll make dinner." One day he mentioned, "Hey, Julie, my mom wants to visit this weekend. Is that okay?" Knowing she might be feeling lonely after the loss of Eric's father, I was more than willing to welcome her. Of course, I replied, although I was aware that we still had some tidying up to do. She's welcome, I assured him, and he quickly said he'd let his mom know. He then suggested inviting his brother and Catherine too, to which I happily agreed. It might sound odd, but relocating here meant I could see Catherine more often, which turned out to be a delightful surprise. That weekend, we gathered to catch up and reminisce about my father-in-law. It was a bittersweet occasion. While we all felt the loss deeply, I didn't want to dwell on sadness forever. My mother has picked up a new hobby, Eric's mother shared, her effortless elegance shining through as she spoke. Today she wore a stylish, light purple scarf that added to her commanding presence, even if she seemed a bit thinner than before. Her authority was especially noticeable when she offered advice to Eric and his brother on business matters since the passing of my father-in-law. I noticed that Eric's mother became more exacting with me. Julie, we're running out of drinks. Could you go buy some? She directed at me. Just then, Catherine offered to go instead. Oh, could you? That would be helpful. She replied to Catherine, her tone noticeably softer than how she spoke to me. I suspected she was struggling with her grief, so I chose to overlook her sharp comments for the moment. After dinner, Eric kindly drove everyone home, marking the end of the evening. However, this was just the beginning of more frequent visits from my mother-in-law, who soon began critiquing how I maintained the house, voicing complaints about Catherine, and even rummaging through her fridge uninvited. Julie, Eric is so busy right now. You should be careful with the meals you prepare for him. What if he gets sick too? She cautioned me one day, followed by a remark about some leftover trash. Can't you clean up properly? Her criticism seemed endless, a way to pass the time, but it was always directed at me, never at Catherine, who she would quickly dismiss with claims of other engagements. It wasn't that she disliked me. Perhaps it was simply easier for her to boss around someone who seldom argued back, unlike Catherine, who always stood her ground. This environment made me consider getting the job just to spend less time at home. However, even after securing a position, the situation with my mother-in-law only intensified. Julie, we're out of teriyaki sauce, so pick some up while you're out, she commanded, even as she brought leftovers to take back with her. Her sense of entitlement often left me speechless, especially knowing she could easily afford such things herself. Then one day, a deeply cherished necklace, a keepsake from my mother, vanished from its usual spot. My immediate suspicion fell on my mother-in-law, who was frequently at our house and seemed too familiar with where I kept my belongings. After a fruitless search, I reluctantly confronted her, only to be met with fierce anger. You probably lost it yourself. How dare you accuse me? What kind of person are you? She shouted. I tried to explain that the necklace was a special keepsake from my mother and held immense sentimental value for me, but her response only deepened the wound. I don't care, it's just a necklace. Why don't you ask Eric to buy you a new one? Realizing she couldn't grasp the importance of the necklace, I decided to drop the subject. But then more things began to disappear, money from my wallet and various items around the house. Despite keeping a wary eye on her, I never caught her in the act. Exhausted and confused, I confided in Catherine, who agreed that my mother-in-law was the likely culprit, given that no one else had such access to our home. It saddened me to think that way, but without concrete evidence, I felt powerless. Seeing how troubled I was, Catherine suggested a getaway. You need a break, Julie. Why not join me for a short vacation? The idea of stepping away from it all was appealing. I felt drained, and the thought of a little escape was rejuvenating. So 3 weeks later, as Eric and his brother prepare for a business trip to meet with a company in another state, Catherine and I finalize our plans. I'm heading out, Julie. Just relax and enjoy your time, Catherine encouraged as we got ready. Take care, I replied, grateful for the chance to recharge and hopeful that a little distance might offer some perspective on the chaotic happenings at home. I packed early, eager for the respite that awaited. My travel bag was ready by the door, and I was just about to leave when the doorbell rang. Curious, I checked the video feed and saw my mother-in-law standing at the door, not alone but with a group of friends in tow. Hi, Julie. I brought some friends. Can you let us in? She greeted me as if it were a normal visit. Opening the door, I found her and about 9 friends, all laden with heavy bags. We're staying over tonight. Make us feel comfortable, she announced, as if it were a done deal. Didn't I mention? We're going to see a play nearby tonight, and since it ends late, we decided to stay here, she added casually. This was completely unexpected, especially since I was about to leave for my plans when my mother-in-law interrupted. "Oh, did I inconvenience you? Kayla told me you were okay with it," she said, trying to justify her imposition. I was taken aback by her audacity. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't informed about this, and I already have plans," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. She seemed surprised but quickly retorted, "But you'll be back soon, right? We'll just drop our bags and go out for a while. Can you make dinner and set up beds for us?" Ignoring my stated plans, she acted as if everything was already settled. "I can't. I'm going on a trip with Catherine." "Oh, just for Catherine? You can go anytime. We've come all this way just for today." "How long are you going to make us wait?" she persisted, completely disregarding my needs. Then something caught my eye, a glint of metal around her neck. It was the necklace, a cherished memento from my mother. "Wait. That necklace you're wearing," I began, my voice trailing off in shock. To my astonishment, it was indeed the same necklace. "Kayla, where did you get that necklace?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. "Why, it's just one of my collections. Is there a problem?" she replied smugly, clearly enjoying the control she felt she had. "That can't be right. That necklace is rare and a limited edition," I countered, feeling a mix of anger and betrayal. Just then, Catherine arrived, puzzled as to why I hadn't met her as planned. "I was wondering why you didn't show up at our meeting place and didn't contact me. So this is what was happening," she said upon entering. "I'm sorry I couldn't get in touch," I replied, the stress evident in my voice. Noticing my distress, Catherine quickly picked up on the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between me and the necklace. I was upset and blurted out, "The necklace she's wearing is the same one that belonged to my mother, the one that recently went missing, the one I kept in that special box," I explained, barely holding back tears. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Catherine spoke up loudly enough for everyone to hear, reinforcing the significance of the necklace and its sudden, mysterious appearance around my mother-in-law's neck. In a hushed voice, desperate to keep the matter from her friends, my mother-in-law whispered, "Can you both stop this? It's embarrassing. Do you want to accuse me of theft?" Her face flushed with indignation. "Yes, I find it suspicious," Catherine replied firmly, not backing down. "Do you have any proof that I stole it?" My mother-in-law shot back. "It's embarrassing to have such unreasonable daughters-in-law. Please don't make a scene in front of my friends." She then turned back to her group with a forced smile. "Well, let's go inside, everyone," she attempted to usher her friends inside. A crucial detail flashed in my mind. "Kayla, can I have a look at the necklace, please?" I asked, needing to confirm my suspicion. Catherine circled behind her for a closer look. "Enough of this. What's your mother's name?" My mother-in-law snapped, trying to dismiss us. "It's Amanda." There it was. I spotted the engraving. "The initials AR are right here," I pointed out. Upon seeing the engraving, her friends looked horrified and began to distance themselves. "Stop this. I didn't come here for this. Let's go, everyone," my mother-in-law urged, her tone frantic. "We're not letting you leave," Catherine declared firmly, blocking her path. The friends, sensing the growing tension, muttered, "We're not involved," and quickly made their way toward the subway. "There's been some mistake," my mother-in-law stammered, attempting to follow her friends, but she was stopped by an unexpected presence. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip?" Eric stood there, his arrival surprising everyone. It turned out that his supposed business trip was scheduled for the next day. He had given his mother a false date to see how she would act, a plan devised after Catherine informed him about the missing items from our home. Having visited his childhood home and found similar items missing, Eric had begun to suspect theft. But without concrete evidence, he knew any accusation could easily be denied. "What are you doing here?" Eric demanded. "I was just leaving," she replied, attempting to escape the situation. "Give it back. That necklace isn't yours. It's a keepsake from my parents." "Why do you have it, Ma?" I demanded. "It's not what you think. I found it in my purse. Julie must have set me up," she claimed, trying to shift the blame to me, panic evident in her voice. "Do you think such a lie would work? There's no way Julie would do something like that. First, give the necklace back to Julie. We'll talk after that," Eric insisted. Reluctantly, she removed the necklace and threw it on the ground, then tried to flee. "Hey, wait," we called out, starting to chase her but stopping shortly after. We didn't need to chase her, the truth had already caught up with her. I was bewildered as about 15 police officers stood before my mother-in-law. The scene was surreal, and I struggled to grasp what was unfolding. Then one officer explained, "We received a report from a local resident. They said someone was causing a disturbance here and was often seen entering this house when the owners were away. They asked us to come quickly." "What are you talking about? I'm the mother of the son living here," my mother-in-law retorted, clearly annoyed. "Wait, what do you mean she entered when we weren't home?" I questioned, my curiosity piqued. "I never did such a thing," I interjected, trying to clarify that her visits were always while we were present. The police then shared more. "The informant saw her sneaking into your backyard, likely using a spare key to get inside." Indeed, we had a hidden spare key under a plant pot in the backyard. This revelation sent a chill down my spine and suddenly made sense of the missing items. Eric had suspected something and planned to observe her actions today, but this turn of events was beyond his expectations. "Mom, why were you coming into our house when we weren't home?" Eric demanded an answer. "It's all lies. Are you going to believe some unknown person's story over me?" She shot back. "But you did have my precious necklace, didn't you?" I pressed her further. "Told you I found it in my purse." My mother-in-law maintained her story. One officer intervened. "Let's talk about this at the station." "But I didn't do anything," she pleaded. "Mom, stop this. I can't understand why you did this," Eric said, his tone firm. Hearing her son's words, my mother-in-law seemed momentarily defeated and collapsed to the ground. But just when it appeared she had given up, she burst into a rage. "After your father passed away, I felt so lonely. Seeing her always so cheerful, I couldn't stand it anymore. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt." She confessed her emotions, raw and turbulent, and Eric was visibly shaken by her irrational justification. Sensing the need to address the situation directly, I stepped in front of an increasingly upset Eric. "Kayla, I understand where you're coming from. Perhaps I've been too dismissive of our interactions. However, stealing and causing distress is an entirely different matter. Did you intend to upset me? Is that what you aimed for?" "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped back. "Do you find joy in pushing someone to their limits with such twisted actions? Does it fill the void of your loneliness?" I asked, trying to grasp the depth of her actions. "Shut up. What do you know about me?" she yelled, unwilling to confront the reality of what she had done. "If you're feeling low, you should just tell us. We can't read minds." I attempted to calm her with reason. "Don't mock me. Why would I confide in you, you useless daughter-in-law?" she retorted angrily. "Mom, Julie has a point," Eric chimed in, trying to mediate. As the tension escalated, the police, observing the situation deteriorate, intervened and suggested we relocate to the station. "Are you actually going to arrest me? I can't believe this," she protested vehemently. However, due to multiple eyewitness reports of her unauthorized entry and the suspicion of theft connected to her possession of my belongings, the police decided to detain her. My mother-in-law was arrested on charges of unlawful entry and theft, continuing to assert her innocence. She demanded legal representation and refused the meals provided during her visit. Her father expressed disappointment and encouraged her to sincerely contemplate her actions. His stern reprimand prompted her to tearfully apologize, showing a rare moment of submission to his authority, the only one she seemed unwilling to defy. He cautioned her that without genuine introspection, she shouldn't expect a welcoming return home. Reluctantly, she appeared to acknowledge the gravity of her situation. Perhaps the loss of her husband had left my mother-in-law adrift, with her flashy attire and jewelry serving as armor against her insecurities. I pondered whether her desperate treatment of me and my sister-in-law was merely a facade to mask her vulnerabilities. Nonetheless, her unchecked desires and poor impulse control were distinct issues, and it was evident that her flawed judgments had led to this unfortunate situation. I was stunned by how quickly things had escalated, especially after discovering that my mother-in-law had been using the spare key to enter our home surreptitiously. The thought of someone intruding into our personal space uninvited was deeply unsettling. Thankfully, our vigilant neighbors across the street, particularly the wife who worked from home, noticed her suspicious behavior and reported it. I am immensely grateful for their brave intervention, which has since allowed us to live more peacefully and ensured our safety. We updated our home security by changing all the locks and stopped placing a spare key outside. Eric decided it was best to sever ties with his mother, insisting that she refrain from contacting us in the future. He even warned that legal measures would be taken if she attempted to reach out. After her release, she returned to her childhood home in the countryside and surprisingly adopted a simpler way of life, a stark contrast to her previously extravagant lifestyle. Under the watchful eye of her father, she began to contribute to household chores from dawn. I genuinely hope this change allows her to contemplate her past actions. In the meantime, my father moved in with us primarily to safeguard against any unexpected visits from my mother-in-law. His presence not only serves as a security measure but also brings comfort during this exciting time. As I am expecting our first child, the prospect of becoming grandparents has brought a new level of joy and support from Eric, enhancing the warmth and resolve in our household. While material things may offer momentary pleasure, it's truly the company of loved ones that enriches our lives. As we settle into our current living situation, surrounded by family, we are dedicated to maintaining the tranquility and joy in our daily lives, cherishing the serene and supportive environment we've cultivated.
Oh, indeed? Is it true that you've acquired a house? If so, I'd be interested in living with you. Unexpectedly, my mother-in-law started uttering such an absurd proposition over the phone. She must have caught wind of our recent home purchase from my husband. I could discern my sister-in-law's amused chuckles in the background. Does she believe her laughter can go unnoticed? Honestly, I have no desire to reside with my mother-in-law and the others. I thought my husband shared the same sentiment. However, the fact that they've been informed about our new house. Could it be that they're assuming we'll be living together? The idea that my beloved husband might be in cahoots with them fills me with a bit of apprehension. Yet, I have no intention of yielding to their wishes. Are they trying to manipulate me? If that's their game, I'll reverse the roles. Reflecting on all my past tribulations, I pledged revenge against them. I am Kate Thompson, 30 years old, working as an ordinary employee at a major financial corporation. I married my husband Joe 3 years ago, and though we don't have children yet, there's a valid reason for that, a decision we both took seriously. Joe and I are fully committed to our careers, toiling daily with the aim of advancing. Once our professional lives stabilize, we plan to build our own home and create a stable environment for raising children. We've agreed to revisit the topic of having kids once our careers settle down. This was a decision we made earnestly, sharing our genuine feelings and thoughts. We do aspire to have children eventually, and now, as we prepare for that, I find myself recalling all my past struggles. Then, one day, I successfully executed a well-planned project at work, and my promotion was officially confirmed. While my salary was already sufficient, the promotion brought even more comfort to our lives. On the other hand, Joe, although not promoted, received a substantial salary increase due to his years of service. With both our incomes on the rise, I felt it was time to turn our long-held dream into reality. So I broached the topic with Joe. Joe, I want to talk to you. Over the past year, both of us have had stable incomes. I think it might be time to consider getting our own home. What do you think? Oh, is it time already? From his excited voice, I could tell Joe was thrilled. Actually, I've been thinking about it too, but since I haven't been promoted yet, I felt a bit hesitant to bring it up. Don't worry about that. It's not like only one of us needs to earn money. I was thinking it might be okay to build our home in my name. Really? Well, you do earn more now. If you're okay with it, let's build our home in your name. All right, let's proceed with that. Let's go see some model houses on our next day off. Sounds great. Let's go. We shouldn't miss this opportunity. I really feel grateful for choosing Joe at times like this, as we share the same values. The following week, we made an appointment to view model homes as planned. We looked at various types of houses, expanding our vision for our own home. On weekends, we began creating simple floor plans together, researching online. During a recent visit to a construction company, they suggested that instead of leaving everything to them, it's better if we create our own image for a more satisfying home. So Joe and I started building that image. However, neither of us has much knowledge of architecture or design. Even with research, it takes time to put it into practice. While taking breaks, we continued working, and then the doorbell rang. I thought it was a delivery, but when I opened the door, my mother-in-law was standing there. Unexpectedly, Mother, what brings you here so suddenly like this? My mother-in-law sometimes visits our place without notice. She glared at me and, without a word, took off her shoes and went into the house on her own. I'm here, Joe. Mom, what's up? Surprised by his mother's call, Joe showed a startled reaction. Did you have some business around here? To Joe's question, his mother looked a bit perplexed. Yes, I told Kate about it over the phone a little while ago, but it seems Joe didn't know. I see. Maybe Kate forgot to tell me. Seems like it. Kate, even though she's still young, has a terrible memory. That's not true, Mom. It's not forgetfulness. Kate is incredibly busy with work, and at the same time, she takes care of the household. Her mind is always full of things to do. You're such a kind boy, Joe. If your late father were here, he definitely wouldn't have forgiven that. I really respect Kate from the bottom of my heart. So, Mom, why did you come here today? To Joe's question, his mother smiled contentedly. Then, she slowly took out a travel brochure from her bag, spread a page with a post-it note on the table, and showed it. Listen, Joe. I've always wanted to go to Niagara Falls. Won't you take me, please? My mother-in-law began to say such things excitedly out of the blue. Caught off guard by the sudden request, both Joe and I were left staring at her, mouths agape. My mother-in-law, relentless, kept pressing Joe, who was clearly flustered. Come on, Joe, you agree, right? Think of it as a way to show filial piety. Wait a minute, Mom. I'm in trouble if you suddenly say you want to go on a trip, though you can come too. Actually, I was thinking of going with Claire, but if Joe wants to go, I'm delighted to turn it into a family trip. Claire is Joe's sister. What are you talking about? Kate is here, and I can't get time off from work. But it's strange for me to pay for a trip for you and my sister, right? Not strange at all. Spending money for the family is a wonderful thing, don't you think so, Kate? Suddenly turning to me, my mother-in-law sought my agreement. Though shaken, I firmly expressed my opinion to her. Well, using one's own money for family isn't bad, but I think imposing it on others is different. What do you mean by that? Are you saying I'm trying to extort travel expenses from Joe? I didn't mean to say it in such a harsh way, but listening to you, it sounded like you just wanted us to pay for the trip, Kate. That's terrible. I had no such intention, but you're making me out to be the villain in front of Joe. I'm so shocked. That's not. I didn't mean to call you a villain. I just answered honestly to what was asked. Okay, no need for excuses, Kate. Why are you so heartless? You must not like me, do you? My mother-in-law, visibly upset, glared at me with icy cold eyes. It always turns out like this when she comes over. She always finds some reason to demand money and then squanders it with Claire, Joe's sister. Spending money for the family sounds nice, but what my mother-in-law does is practically extortion. The situation is entirely different when Joe gives them money out of kindness. No matter that they're family, I never really liked Joe's brazen mother and sister. According to Joe, his mother and sister became so selfish after his father passed away. Joe's father died when he was in high school, and since then, they have lived as a trio. While his strict father was alive, he watched over the finances. But with his departure, there was no one to stop them, and they even freely spent the life insurance money. Also, since Claire works part-time, not as a full-time employee, her salary is low, and their life is always on the edge. So this is why she regularly visits our house, making excuses like life is tough, or I want to relax and travel somewhere to extort money from Joe. Before marrying Joe, It seemed he was at the mercy of his mother and her demands after his father's death. A sense of dependence for being cared for by his mother had bound Joe. However, since marrying me, Joe seems to be gradually realizing their true nature. Even when repeatedly asked for money, recently he's been trying hard to refuse. For Joe, that's quite a growth. Moreover, he has recently become able to speak back firmly to his mother. To my mother-in-law's spiteful words like, "You don't like me, do you?" Or "Why should I for such an uncharming daughter-in-law?" Joe responded clearly, "Just because you're my mother doesn't mean you can speak badly of Kate. Didn't Kate just answer what you asked her, Mom? You're taking Kate's side. What are you talking about?" "I think you're in the wrong here, Mom. That's so unfair. Surely Kate must have poisoned your mind against me. Poor thing, you were such a kind child before we got married." "I'm telling you that's not it. I'm saying this because I think so." Joe's firm response surprised my mother-in-law, who was not used to being talked back to like that. With a frustrated look, biting her lower lip, she said, "Fine," and left. "Kate, I'm sorry. I'd always make you feel uncomfortable." "No, it's okay. You stood up for us this time. Once we build our own home, we'll be further away. Let's not interact with Mom and them." "Then yeah, that would be a relief. If you're okay with it, Joe, I'm grateful." The place we are considering for our new home is quite far from our current apartment, improving the convenience to both of our workplaces. Our current apartment is about 5 train stations away from Joe's parental home, but the new house will be 3 times farther and require transfers. The route from the station is also complex, so if we don't give them the address, they won't be able to find our new home. It's a good chance to cleanly break off our relationship with my mother-in-law. Later, we submitted our imagined floor plan to the construction company, and the construction started 2 months later. After about half a year, our $500,000 dream home was completed. We managed to squeeze some time from our busy work schedules to pack a few days before the move. I received a call from my mother-in-law on my smartphone. "Busy packing." I turned on the speaker and answered the phone. "Hello," I said, and my mother-in-law started speaking in an unusually high-pitched voice. "Kate, when are you moving? You bought a house, right? I want to live with you." Suddenly, on the phone, my mother-in-law began to say such an outrageous thing. She must have heard about our new home purchase from Joe. I could hear Claire, my sister-in-law, chuckling in the background. "That's great. We can make Kate work for us every day. Mom, you came up with a good idea." Do they think their words aren't reaching me? It's clear they plan to piggyback on our move. I imagine them planning to use me for an easy life. Honestly, I have no intention of living with them. I thought Joe felt the same, but telling them about the new house. Could it be that they're assuming we'll live together? The thought that my beloved Joe might be in league with them fills me with a bit of fear. But I have no intention of letting them have their way. They're probably trying to use me, right? If that's the case, I'll turn it around and use them. I told them the date of our move. Then my mother-in-law and Claire said, "We'll come to the apartment in the afternoon on that day. Take us with you in the car, and arrange the movers for us too." They hung up after making their demands. But of course, I have no intention of complying. For now, I'll check the facts with Joe. As I was about to go and tell Joe this, he was already standing behind me. "Joe, you were there. I came to say we should take a break, but was that Mom on the phone just now?" "Ah, yes. I was going to talk to you about it too." "Why did you tell your mother about our new home?" "It's not like that. Actually, when Mom came over last time, she seems to have seen the floor plan of our new house. She kept pestering me about it every day. So, I just... Kate, I'm really sorry." "I see. So you don't intend to live with your mother, right?" "Of course not. After hearing that phone call, I'm even thinking it's better to cut ties with her." Joe's expression was filled with more anger than ever. It was the first time I had seen him this angry. From what Joe told me, my mother-in-law had seen the layout of our new home and was convinced it was a spacious house. She had pretended to be interested and called Joe repeatedly, asking him about the number of rooms and details of the facilities. But it seems that Joe is on my side, which relieved me. then there's no problem at all. This made me determined to get my revenge on my mother-in-law. I've had enough of her saying whatever she wants, but it's goodbye to that now. I'll make sure to settle this properly. And so, the day of the move arrived. Joe and I had the movers transport our things in the morning and headed to our new home in our car. By the time we finished moving everything, it was already past 1:00 p.m., checking our phones while taking a break. We saw dozens of missed calls from my mother-in-law. She called me too, Joe said, sounding weary. Then, my mother-in-law called again. I answered the phone with the speaker still on. Hello, Kate. Where are you? I told you I'd be at the apartment in the afternoon, didn't I? Yes, you did say that. So what can I do for you? What do you mean? You didn't arrange for the movers. I've been waiting at home, and not a single truck has shown up. So I had to go to your apartment myself. Is that so? Well, that's too bad. You know I didn't arrange for any movers. What? That's not the agreement. Where is your new house? Huh? You really think I'd tell you? After saying that clearly, my mother-in-law uttered a dumbfounded huh. She probably thought that as long as Joe was there, she could always have her way. But Joe is different now. He's my precious ally, trying to cut off the bad ties with his family. Determined to release all my pent-up feelings, I spoke firmly. Just to let you know, neither Joe nor I have any intention of living with the two of you from now on. Please don't involve yourselves in our lives. What are you saying? Your opinion doesn't matter. It's up to Joe to decide. At least tell me where the new house is right now. Huh? How are you going to get here without even knowing the address? This house is in my name. I have the right to decide who lives here. If you two just barge in, it's trespassing, and I'll sue you right away. What? Trespassing? How rude to say that about your husband's family. At that point, Joe spoke up in a deathly cold voice. Family? My father, who was a family member, is already gone, isn't he? What are you saying, Joe? After hearing that last phone call, I'm utterly fed up with you two. Just having a blood relation with you is embarrassing. From now on, my family is only Dad and Kate. I no longer consider you two as my family. Wait, Joe, don't say such things. Don't bother us again, got it? With that, Joe hung up without waiting for her reply. He swiftly set his phone to block her calls. Hey, Joe, are you really okay with this? Yeah, I finally realized that Mom was just using me to her advantage. I feel completely relieved now. Joe looked truly refreshed, sincerely believing what he said. That's how we, as a couple, managed to cut off the bad ties with my mother-in-law and sister. Afterwards, they had to change their lifestyle drastically, as Joe stopped supporting them completely. Without any contact with Joe, they lost their fallback option. Later on, my sister-in-law's part-time income wasn't enough, and my mother-in-law had to start working part-time as well. Being a housewife for so long, she wasn't used to the working environment and was clumsy, often being disliked at her workplace. Meanwhile, we live a peaceful life in our new home, with no sudden visits from my mother-in-law anymore. We are truly stress-free. I'm endlessly grateful to Joe for believing in me and cutting ties with his toxic blood relatives. We might face various challenges in the future, but even then, I trust Joe, and we will support each other and walk through life together.
Hi, I'm Jessica, a 30-year-old woman, and I want to share a recent experience that helped bring closure to a difficult period in my life, one that involved both my husband and his family. This chapter began a few months ago, and now that the dust has started to settle, I'm still processing the emotional fallout. I believe opening up about it might help me heal. Let's rewind to 3 years ago when I made a significant life decision. I married my boyfriend, Tyler. We met through mutual friends and enjoyed 3 wonderful years together before deciding to tie the knot. Tyler was always the life of the party, fun, attentive, and loving. He came from a well-off family and had a great job, which meant he could shower me with gifts and affection. Our bond grew stronger over our shared love for travel, and as our relationship deepened, my friends frequently praised him, genuinely happy for us. Tyler's generosity was often overwhelming. I remember when he bought me a new laptop for my college graduation, a gesture that, while incredibly kind, also made me feel uncomfortable at times. I couldn't help but notice the financial imbalance. "Tyler, I'm just a student," I'd say. "I can't match your spending. Let me at least split some costs." But Tyler would brush it off, insisting that it was normal for him to pamper his partner, just like his friends did. Eventually, I accepted his gestures, though I still sought ways to contribute within my means. Once I landed a good-paying job after graduation, I was excited to reciprocate his generosity. We started sharing expenses more equally and even talked about moving in together. "You can move in with me," Tyler said one day. "I inherited my house from my grandpa, so no rent to worry about, but we can split everything else to keep things fair." Although I had some reservations, Tyler reassured me that he had my best interests at heart, and so we embarked on this new chapter together. Things were going smoothly. Our financial responsibilities were shared fairly, given our different incomes, until I had the chance to meet Tyler's family. They lived far from us, and Tyler had work commitments, so I had to host them on my own. Before their arrival, Tyler warned me about their judgmental tendencies but didn't go into much detail. He just advised me to smile through it and not take any harsh words to heart. With that in mind, I approached the meeting with cautious optimism. However, any hope of a warm welcome quickly vanished when Tyler's parents and sister arrived. Instead of the friendly atmosphere I'd anticipated, they showed up visibly annoyed, setting a tense tone from the start. It didn't take long before their opinions about me became painfully clear. "So, you're the woman Tyler's been seeing," his mother Martha said coldly. "I didn't expect to find you living here. Do you even pay rent?" "No, Martha," I replied calmly, though her question caught me off guard. "Tyler told me the house was fully paid for, but we split all other bills evenly." Martha wasn't convinced. "Just because the house is paid for doesn't mean you can freeload. This is Tyler's house, not yours. Remember that." Her words stung, and the conversation grew more uncomfortable. Tyler's sister, Teresa, wasn't any better. She barely spoke to me, opting instead to glare or mention her marriage to a billionaire, as if to remind me of her superior status. Every attempt I made to connect with her was met with dismissiveness. Throughout their visit, Tyler offered no support. In fact, he seemed to side with his family, echoing their sentiments. His parents criticized my spending habits, particularly my purchases of makeup and skincare products, claiming they were frivolous considering my so-called limited contributions to the household. Their skepticism about my financial independence only deepened, partly because of comments Tyler had made. He casually mentioned to them, "Jessica was just a struggling student when we met," as if I'd been entirely dependent on him. While it's true Tyler supported me financially early on, his portrayal wasn't entirely accurate, and it felt like he was subtly reinforcing their negative opinions. Tyler's family's disapproval of me, combined with his passive stance, made the entire experience incredibly challenging. It left me questioning not only my relationship with them, but also the dynamic between Tyler and me. I was caught off guard by these remarks and reminded Tyler that we had already adjusted our financial arrangement to split the bills equally. I explained that I had lived modestly both before and during our relationship and that any luxury items I had were gifts from him, gifts I had often warned him against due to their extravagance. Yet Tyler defended his lavish spending, claiming that his social status required him to give extravagant gifts. It became clear that his generosity was more about impressing his friends than truly caring for me. Their visit left me with a bitter feeling, so I confronted Tyler about the entire ordeal once they left. Unfortunately, he brushed it off. "Don't take it to heart, Jessica," he said dismissively. "They meant well. What they said wasn't serious. Relax, you're overreacting." Despite my concerns, he refused to acknowledge the problem. 5 months later, Tyler proposed, and despite my reservations, I accepted in a moment of happiness. We started planning our engagement party, deciding to split the costs evenly. By then, I was running a small business on the side. Tyler knew about it, but he never really showed interest in how much I was earning. To me, it was more of a fulfilling hobby than a major source of income. When it came time to organize the engagement party, I decided to indulge a bit, feeling it was an occasion worth celebrating. Tyler supported me in this, and we made sure to share the expenses equally. I even took on the additional costs of covering plane tickets for my extended family so they could attend. However, as the celebration unfolded, the same old criticisms resurfaced. "You shouldn't have splurged so much on this party, Jessica. You're draining Tyler's account before you're even married. At this rate, you'll end up with a backyard wedding," his family sneered. "I thought you were financially irresponsible, but it's worse than I imagined." Their harsh words stung once again, clouding what should have been a joyful moment with doubt and frustration. I stood my ground and firmly responded to Martha. "Yes, the party was extravagant, but we both agreed to it. I paid my share, and it was actually your son's idea to invite so many people." Tyler had insisted, and I couldn't say no, especially when he mentioned he didn't mind the expense. But the criticism continued. Martha accused me of manipulating Tyler into spending more than he should, while Teresa chimed in, claiming she knew exactly what kind of person I was and that I should have been more considerate. Frustrated and overwhelmed by the tension, I excused myself to find some peace outside on the venue's lawn. There, I overheard Teresa and her husband Justin laughing at my expense. It felt like my engagement party was falling apart, with Tyler seemingly oblivious to his family's harsh judgments. Many of his extended relatives assumed I was jobless, painting me as a dependent fiancé. Noticing my distress, my mom, always protective and perceptive, approached me. As someone who had raised me as a single parent, she understood the challenges of managing finances and urged me to reconsider the engagement, pointing out the ongoing mean comments from Tyler's family. After the party, I confronted Tyler about everything that had happened. He shrugged it off, saying they were just joking, and reassured me that financial matters didn't concern him because he loved me. But I was firm, telling him I wanted to contribute more significantly to our expenses, including rent. Once again, he dismissed the idea. As we moved forward with wedding planning, the stress only intensified. Tyler's parents continued to criticize every choice I made, accusing me of bankrupting their son. The constant scrutiny made the engagement period feel unbearable. I tried explaining that everyone, including my mom, was pitching in for the wedding expenses, but Martha sharply accused me of taking advantage of Tyler, suggesting that I was trying to drain his bank account. Amid these accusations, my in-laws unfairly branded me a gold digger. I calmly addressed Gabriel, hoping to alleviate his concerns. "Gabriel, I'm not asking for any financial help. We are completely capable of financing the wedding ourselves," I reassured him. Despite my explanations, Teresa didn't hold back her criticisms, especially about the cost of my dress and makeup for the wedding day, even though I had clarified that those were covered by my mother. The ceremony itself went smoothly, but during the reception, Martha and Gabriel continued to criticize my spending habits, accusing me of financially exploiting their son. Despite the harsh words, I knew that no matter how much I explained or defended myself, they were determined to paint me in the worst possible light. I chose to remain silent, determined not to let any conflict ruin what was supposed to be a special day. A few months later, Tyler received a significant promotion at work, and he was eager to celebrate with a grand family dinner. I was thrilled for him and wanted to make the occasion even more memorable, so I offered to cover all the expenses myself. "Tyler, I want this dinner to be something extraordinary. I'm so proud of you, and I want to celebrate your success," I told him enthusiastically. He appreciated the gesture, and I shared that my business was flourishing, providing me with a stable income, and that I had recently accessed a trust fund from my paternal grandfather. I meticulously planned the entire event, determined to make it perfect for his celebration. However, when his family arrived, they were visibly displeased, despite the positive feedback from other guests. It became clear that they had reservations about the lavishness of the dinner. During the speeches, Martha stood up, her voice loud enough to command the room. "I want to thank everyone for gathering here to celebrate my son," she began. "He's incredibly hardworking, generous, and truly deserving of this promotion. Unfortunately, his good fortune hasn't extended to his choice of a partner." The room grew tense as her words hung in the air. "It's unfortunate that, of all people, he's tied himself to what some might call a gold digger." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I remained still as she continued, her tone dripping with regret. "I only wish he had seen her true nature earlier. Then maybe he wouldn't have to work so hard to support her lavish lifestyle." Her eyes scanned the room, making sure her message was heard. It's painfully obvious to everyone here that his wife has been extravagant, from the engagement party to tonight's dinner. It seems she has nearly drained his accounts. The sting of her words was sharp, but I kept my composure, knowing full well that any reaction would only fuel their baseless accusations. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Martha added smugly, "Thank goodness we had Jessica sign a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. At least some of his assets are protected." She sighed, almost relieved, as she continued, "It's a good thing my son married someone who can at least keep up the appearance of a trophy wife." Tyler chimed in, agreeing with his mother. "I can't even afford to spend money on myself anymore. There's nothing left," he lamented, going so far as to say that marrying me was a mistake. He even compared my behavior unfavorably to what he imagined another wife might do in a similar situation. In shock and frustration, I finally spoke up. "Do you really think I'm a gold digger?" Tyler's response was sharp and hurtful. "Your lifestyle is quite damaging to my bank account." Stunned but determined to set the record straight, I confronted the accusations head-on. "Since you all think I'm such a gold digger, let me show you my bank balance. Maybe that'll clear things up." I revealed my financial independence to the room, which was met with disbelief. Amid the heated exchange, Martha pointedly accused, "Did you steal my son's money?" Tyler added suspiciously, "She must have taken it from you." Frustrated but calm, I responded, "I don't need to steal money from your son. Everything I have is from my own hard work. Besides, I recently accessed a trust fund left by my grandfather. I had plans to use it to buy a bigger house as a surprise for Tyler, but given the circumstances, that seems unlikely now." Despite my efforts to clarify, Tyler, seemingly ignoring the tension, suggested, "We can still buy the house. It'll be a wonderful gift." But I was resolute. "This is not happening. Your family has insulted me for too long, and you've never once stood up for me. Instead, you've allowed these false assumptions about me using your money to continue." My frustration was evident as I made my stance clear. Tyler, attempting to downplay the situation, claimed, "You're overreacting," but I knew I couldn't let it go this time. I was told I was overreacting, but I stood firm. "No, I'm not overreacting. Everyone here knows what your family has been saying about me. They were here when you allowed them to insult me at our engagement party." Feeling the weight of years of disrespect and humiliation, I reached a breaking point. I could no longer tolerate the toxic environment and told Tyler bluntly, "I want a divorce." As Tyler tried to plead and explain, my mother intervened. "You've never defended my daughter. It's time she ends this toxic relationship for good," she declared firmly. We left the party, leaving behind a crowd of shocked attendees who whispered among themselves. Despite the dramatic scene, I was resolute in my decision to end the relationship. My mother's support was unwavering, marking the end of a painful chapter in my life. After the confrontation, I went straight to our home, gathered my belongings, and while Tyler persistently tried to reach me, I muted my phone and went to stay with my mother for solace. The next day, I contacted my cousin, a lawyer, to start drafting the divorce papers. With a prenuptial agreement in place, the process promised to be straightforward, sparing me from sharing any of my significant financial assets with Tyler. However, the situation escalated when Tyler and his family showed up at my mother's doorstep, demanding to speak with me. My mother stood firm and instructed them to leave. Meanwhile, Tyler's messages ranged from tearful apologies to unsettling threats, which I documented and prepared to use for a restraining order if necessary. My mother's steadfast support gave me strength. Tyler even attempted to confront me at my office, but after informing security, he was promptly escorted out. It was then I decided to resign from my well-paying job. My thriving business meant I no longer needed the position, and I was no longer focused on accumulating wealth but on seeking the peaceful and dignified life. I handed in my resignation that very day and began moving forward. A week later, I served the divorce papers to Tyler at his workplace, only to find out he had already been informed of my resignation. My former colleagues reported his continued attempts to send flowers and gifts to my mother's house, which we consistently returned. The ongoing harassment led me to consider relocating. With my mother's encouragement, I found an ideal house in a neighboring state, providing a sanctuary away from my ex. As I awaited the finalization of the divorce paperwork, the judge facilitated a smooth proceeding thanks to the strong prenuptial agreement. During the 5 months of our separation, I took the time to regroup and prepare for a new chapter in my life. I quickly settled into my new home, changed my number to avoid the incessant messages from Tyler and his family, and began to enjoy my newfound freedom. I heard through the grapevine that Tyler's life was falling apart. He blamed his parents for the end of our marriage and faced professional setbacks as his colleagues distanced themselves and his superiors were displeased with the negative publicity. His parents contributed to the turmoil by spreading infidelity rumors, but thankfully, these baseless accusations didn't gain traction. In contrast, my life began to flourish. I focused on growing my business and embraced my newfound freedom. I started going out more and even re-entered the dating scene. While Tyler's past actions made me cautious, I remained hopeful that I would heal and eventually find someone who truly values and cherishes me. Although Tyler's actions caused me considerable pain, the strength I gained from overcoming those challenges propelled me into a brighter future, full of possibilities and self-discovery. I look forward to what lies ahead, confident in my resilience and clearer about what I seek in relationships and in life. I've moved out, so your house is gone. It must be tough without a place to call home, my mother-in-law said happily on the phone. I just responded with a quiet, She continued, enjoy your life in your new home. I replied, yes, thank you, and please never come back to my house. After all, you'll be getting a divorce. Then she hung up. I stood at the airport, feeling not angry, but happy. I clenched my fist in a small victory and walked home feeling light. My name is Emma. My husband, David, had to go work abroad soon after we got married, so we had to live apart for a short while. David and I had been dating for 5 years before we got married, and we had lived together too. We trusted each other a lot because of our long relationship. I wasn't worried about David cheating on me. I just hoped he stayed safe while he was away. Our days should have been calm, even though sometimes I felt lonely. But things got complicated when my mother-in-law decided to move into our house. She got divorced when David was young. When she found out David was going overseas, she said, I'll keep an eye on you, Emma, to make sure you don't cheat. She started living in our house without asking us first. It turns out she was cheated on and left by my father-in-law, who disappeared afterwards. Worried the same thing might happen to David, she decided to watch over me. But her constant spying made life really hard. I felt desperate, so I asked David for help. He kept telling his mom to leave, but she wouldn't listen. David trusts you too much, Emma. I can tell you'll cheat. She accused me for no reason, giving me a headache every day. No matter what I did, she thought I was being unfaithful. She wouldn't even cook dinner for me. She'd use food from the fridge to make her own meals, never leaving any for me, and she didn't buy groceries herself. She used the ones I bought, leaving me with nothing when I came home. I complained about it, but my mother-in-law didn't seem to care or listen. I bet you're out having dinner with your boyfriend since you're cheating, she'd say, which made me really upset. Even when I came home late from work and started cooking, she'd make a scene, saying, you must be cheating if you come home at this hour, leaving your mother-in-law alone. During my busy work times when I often came home late, she'd always accuse me of cheating. It stressed me out so much that I felt sick. Please, I'm begging you, just leave. I'm not cheating. I really love David, I told her. David, who was too busy to come back to the US, tried his best to get his mother to leave. But her response was disheartening. So you want me to leave that badly? You must be cheating after all, she said. At that point, I could only sigh. On my day off, I went out to meet a friend, and once again my mother-in-law accused me of cheating. She was determined to catch me in the act and clumsily tried to follow me. She hid behind lampposts and her house's brick wall, trying to stay out of sight. I just ignored her and went on with my plans. I met up with my friend at a cafe, grumbling quietly so my mother-in-law wouldn't hear. Suddenly, I saw flashes of light. She was taking pictures of me. My friend, Abby, who I've known since our student days, looked suspicious and asked, "What's that?" Abby, being tough, started to get up, saying, "Should I say something to her?" But I quickly convinced her to stay seated. No, please stay, Abby." Abby had a pixie cut and wore street-style clothes, which made her look a bit like a man. I joked that my mother-in-law might have thought she was a guy, which made Abby burst out laughing. Finding the situation amusing, Abby leaned closer to me, pretending to hold my hand to tease my mother-in-law. Each time my mother-in-law took a picture, she seemed thrilled, snapping away while her nostrils flared with excitement. It was so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh along. After witnessing my mother-in-law's silly antics, I felt relieved and went shopping with Abby before we said goodbye. But as expected, my mother-in-law followed me home, hiding behind lampposts and walls just like before. Sometimes I'd play a quick game of red light, green light with her, and she'd scurry off to hide. It was amusing, and I found myself joining in her ridiculous game. I couldn't help but think how foolish she was to believe that I didn't notice her following me. When I got home and started taking off my shoes, she rushed in excitedly. If she was tailing me, she could have at least waited a bit before coming back. I was surprised when she showed me a disposable camera. "Emma, I finally caught proof of your cheating. I'm going to send these to David, so get ready." "Oh really? Good luck with that," I said casually, which she didn't like. She spent the rest of the time buzzing around me like a nagging child. "Are you okay with this? It's proof of cheating. Your face and his are clear in the photos." But I just calmly kept saying, "That's fine." It was unfortunate that Abby's appearance sometimes led to her being mistaken for a man, but David knew her well from before we got married. So even if my mother-in-law sent a photo of me with Abby to David, he'd probably recognize her as just a friend. Despite enduring my mother-in-law's ridiculous schemes, I suddenly had to go on a business trip overseas. It was a shame I wouldn't get to see David because it was in a different country, but it couldn't be helped. I told my mother-in-law about my trip, although I didn't ask for her opinion. But in her mind, it seemed like a romantic getaway. As I got ready for my trip, my mother-in-law smirked and said, "It'll be a big problem if you come back pregnant from your romantic getaway. David hasn't seen you in a while, so it won't be easy to pretend the baby is his." Her distasteful thoughts made it pointless to argue back. I replied casually, "Yeah, it's just a business trip, not a romantic getaway," and headed off. The trip was really busy, and the days passed by quickly in a blur. When I finally got back to the US, I was exhausted. My boss, who had also been on the trip, seemed tired too and went home. I had planned to grab some duty-free sweets before heading home, so I took a break on a bench. Just then, my phone rang. It was Abby calling, and she had something surprising to tell me. "Hey Emma, welcome back. There's something I need to tell you. Your mother-in-law showed up at the company where I work." "What?" Abby's family's company isn't the kind of place just anyone visits. Hearing that my mother-in-law went there made me really angry. Abby explained how she handled the situation and asked if she went too far. I replied, "No, I think it was just right." After laughing and ending the call with Abby, I was about to leave when I got another call from my mother-in-law. "Emma, you should be back from your trip now. Did you enjoy your affair trip?" I said, "It wasn't an affair trip, and I didn't particularly enjoy it because I went there for work." "Well, I've already sent David the evidence photos." I simply responded with, "Hi C" to my mother-in-law, who seemed pleased with herself. Ignoring my lack of reaction, she just kept on talking. "Actually, I moved, so your house is no longer there. I sold the old house. So you must be struggling without a place to go back to. But hang in there," my mother-in-law cheerfully said. I responded with an uninterested huh as she laughed happily. "Enjoy your life in your new house. Thank you, and please never come back to our house. After all, you're going to be divorced soon." After my mother-in-law hung up, I stood in the airport for a while. But slowly, I felt better. It wasn't anger in my heart, but joy. I did it. I pumped my fist a little and started my journey home with a light step. Of course, I was going back to the house my mother-in-law claimed she had sold. Maybe she had taken out the furniture. Even though a lot of things were missing, I accepted it as a parting gift. I quickly called a locksmith to replace the front door lock, ensuring my mother-in-law couldn't get in even if she tried to return. Then I sprawled out in the living room, basking in the freedom I had finally achieved. Inside the house, I pumped my fist again and shouted, "I did it." The next day, I received a call from my mother-in-law. "What's wrong?" I asked her with a hint of malice. She sounded flustered and trembled as she spoke. "Actually, I thought I sold the house, but it turns out I didn't. It seems I borrowed money without realizing it. Debt collectors are coming, and it's really scary." "That sounds terrifying," I replied. realizing that the company she unknowingly visited, thinking it was Abby's parents, was actually a real estate company on the surface, but secretly involved in loan sharking. According to Abby, they had warned her multiple times that the house couldn't be sold. The house was in David's name, so she couldn't just sell it on her own. After being rejected by all the real estate agencies she approached, she ended up at the company run by Abby's parents. Desperate to sell the house, they gave her a promissory note to sign, without her realizing the true implications. The document obligated her to repay a large debt, with the daunting requirement of $1,000 to be paid every day. She managed to pay off the debt collectors for today, but she didn't have the means to come up with that amount every day from tomorrow onwards. So she came to me in tears, pleading, "Please, Emma, you have to help me. The debt collectors have been pounding at my door since dawn. It's terrifying. I can't sleep well, and I don't have much money. I used the borrowed money to buy a new house, so I don't have any savings left. How about this? Please transfer $10,000 to my account every week until I've paid off the debt." But honestly, do you think there will ever be a day when we can pay off this company's debt? Even if we combine my income with David's, it's impossible to come up with that much money every week. I'm sorry, but your only option is to work hard and earn it yourself. What? Like there's a job out there where I can make $1,000 every day. Well, why not try talking to the company you borrowed money from? Maybe they can help you find a good job. I meant it as a joke, but my confused mother-in-law responded, "Really? Then I'll go and see," and hung up. I sighed to myself, realizing there was no stopping my mother-in-law now. Later, I heard from Abby that my mother-in-law had suddenly shown up at the company and said, "I have no choice but to work because I have no money. Is there a simple and easy job where I can earn more than $1,000 a day?" Abby and her team managed to find my mother-in-law a job, but it wasn't what she expected. The company was one where many employees lived in rundown shacks serving as dormitories. At this company, the workers toiled tirelessly day and night, often doing physically demanding labor. Even elderly individuals were pushed to work relentlessly. My mother-in-law seemed to be working herself to exhaustion. The workplace dormitories were fenced in with barbed wire, resembling a prison, and employees were blindfolded and transported to and from work in vans, leaving them unaware of their location. "She'll be free, won't she? She can pay off the debt, if that day ever comes," Abby said with a smile. "She's a dear friend of mine, but I can't help feeling a bit frightened for my mother-in-law." Several weeks after my mother-in-law disappeared, David's overseas assignment ended, and he returned home. When I explained what had happened to David, he simply said, "There's nothing we can do about my mom. All we can do is wish her well from a distance." It became clear that David never really got along with his mother. While he tolerated her because she was his mother, it seemed he had run out of patience with her constant suspicions about me, his wife. When I asked David of the supposed evidence photos of my infidelity, he said, "Oh yeah," as if he had forgotten, and handed me a photo from his bag. "That's Abby, right? I have no idea why my mom would think this is proof of infidelity. I actually had a big argument with her on the phone. I told her I cut ties as she kept suspecting you, Emma, but she wouldn't listen. It really frustrated me, but I thought this was a good picture, so I brought it home." It's true, my mother-in-law might have had a talent for photography. What a shame. The photo she took of Abby and me, with the beautiful scenery in the background, had a certain style, like a page from a photo album. It was amusing how Abby was playfully making a peace sign behind her back. That was just so like her. We really owe Abby a lot. We should visit her properly sometime soon. Just be careful not to sign any documents she might try to give you. I'll never sign anything from Abby. David and I chuckled together. Finally, we were able to live like a newlywed couple. We had no idea what happened to my mother-in-law after that, but she's probably still working hard somewhere in the States. We could have found out where she was by asking Abby, but neither David nor I had any desire to track her down. David and I continued to live happily together, and eventually we welcomed our first child. We're enjoying our blissful days together.